Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. It is the virtual meeting of the Edina City Council. It is Tuesday evening, March 2nd, 2021, 7 p.m. And we are going to call the meeting to order momentarily. We've got some things to discuss. First of all, because of working in the virtual world, the meeting is being held electronically, of course, to comply with the governor's Stay Safe Minnesota order and to ensure the safety of all residents and staff. All members of the City Council, staff, and presenters are participating from their homes or their offices. Before we begin, there's a few things to cover for those listening in and hoping to participate in portions of the meeting. Could you please mute yourself, Mr. Fleck? Thank you. If you're not muted, it would be helpful if you. The city, of course, is committed to continuing to receive and hear your input on matters. We've been collecting public input through voicemail on our engagement website, bettertogetheredina.org. It's important you all know that all public hearing comments are read before we take action. You do not need to submit the same feedback in any other way. All communications are considered equally, regardless of the way in which they were submitted. Tonight, there'll be 2 times to call in to provide comment via phone from the community. The first is in community comment. That is an actual portion of the agenda, community comment. You're allowed to speak about anything that's not on tonight's agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing. And then the second opportunity to call in is to comment during the public hearings that we have before us this evening. If you want to call in during community comment or provide testimony for the public hearing, here's the number that you need to call. It's 800-374-0221. The conference ID is 1074418. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak. Our city manager, Scott Neal, will time the speakers, and he'll let you know if you go over the 3-minute mark. And then we need to have you wrap up your comments. So remember, you don't need to call in tonight if you've already provided feedback or communications with us in any form. But if you have new comments to make or information to bring forward relative to either community comment or a public hearing, feel free to call in. So to make sure all residents have an opportunity to participate, we won't act on any public hearing matter tonight. The public hearings will remain open until noon on Monday, March 8th. You can leave a voicemail with your feedback at 952-826-0377. Submit any comments you might have through the form that's online at bettertogetheredina.org. So thanks in advance for your patience as we work to conduct this meeting online using different types of software and almost 20 people participating from their homes. We hope there won't be any electronic issues, but if there are, we'll try to cure those issues as soon as we can. So now I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask Clerk Allison to do roll call. Clerk Allison, roll call, please.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Staunton.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. Next matter on the agenda this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We've got a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening. Is there anyone who wishes, on the council, wishes to modify the agenda for any particular reason? Or Manager Neal, anything you need to modify on the agenda?
Not from staff.
All right, okay. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as shown?
So moved.
All right, and we have a second?
Second.
All right. Member Jackson moves, Member Pierce seconds. The adoption of the meeting agenda is shown. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, on that particular issue. Clerk Allison.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I lost my other screen. Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Jackson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pierce.
Aye.
Councilmember Staunton.
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. The meeting agenda as published is approved. Now we'll move on to community comment. And again, now as we hear from residents who would like to speak about something not on tonight's agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing, feel free to call in, participate in the meeting this evening. The number again that you want to call is 800-374-0221. The conference ID is 1074418. An operator will ask for your name and street address. To get in the queue, you need to press *1, and Director Benarott will bring you in to speak to the council. Again, just a reminder, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak, and City Manager Scott Neal will let you know when you've used up your 3 minutes, and then you should be wrapping up your comments as quickly as possible. Director Benarott, do we have anybody in the queue for community comment?
Good evening, Mayor Hovland, members of the council. We do not have anyone in the queue or on the intercall as of this minute. Because there is a slight delay with the broadcast, I would recommend we wait a minute or so before moving on with the next item in the agenda. My clock shows that it's 7:07, so I will come back to you when I have a caller or at 7:08, whichever is first.
Very good.
Just a reminder, if you would like to speak under community comment, please press *1 on your telephone keypad after entering the intercall. That will signal your intention to speak and get you in the queue. I do have someone on the line, but she's not indicating a desire to speak. So since it's 7:08, I think it's safe for you to move forward with your meeting.
All right. Thank you, Director Benarott. We'll move on to the next portion of the agenda, and that is the city manager's response to any community comment that was made at the prior city council meeting, which would have been 2 weeks ago. Manager Neal, anything to respond to from 2 weeks ago?
Yes, there was, Your Honor. It was, sorry. Yes, there was, Your Honor. It was one comment from Roberta Castellano, and her comment, and we're actually going to we're going to address later tonight in the presentation from the task force, but she had the idea or wanted us to consider the idea of adapting or adapting our current special assessment policy so that we could charge differential special assessments for the same project area based on the value, the estimated market value of the home. So she shared with us some information about how that same sort of system works in the property tax system. And she was wondering whether that could be applied, that same sort of scaling of special assessments could be applied into our policy. So we're gonna talk a little bit. That's not the focus of the task force discussion tonight by any means, but we can address that later this evening.
All right. Thank you, Manager Neal. Does that prompt any inquiry or comment from council members? All right. Let's move on to the consent agenda and the potential adoption of the items on the consent agenda. I understand that Council Member Anderson wishes to remove item 6N, N as in Nancy, from the consent agenda. Does any other council member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Hearing nothing, is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda with the exception of 6 and N?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Member Staunton moves, Member Jackson seconds the adoption of the consent agenda with the exception of 6N. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, with respect to the motion as stated.
Councilmember Jackson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pierce,
Aye.
Councilmember Staunton,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. The items on the consent agenda are adopted by single motion with the exception of 6N, and we will now turn to Councilmember Anderson, who wanted us to pull that particular resolution entitled 2021-26, which deals with supporting local control for local elections. That's its kind of generic heading, but I think I'm pleased that you pulled this one, Member Anderson, so that we can have a little discussion about the implications of approving this resolution. Member Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I understand the nature of the resolution. I must report with a certain level of chagrin that I don't frankly understand clearly ranked choice voting. So as I view the resolution and I consider actions that we take, what we're essentially doing with this resolution is supporting legislation at the state level that will allow ranked choice voting to be passed on to cities such as ours, our construct. And so I glean from that, my logical conclusion to that is that we support ranked choice voting, and we would like to implement that in our town. So I view it, and I've read what I can find on the matter. I don't really have any studies as such. I read what I can find. I continue to say, well, what are we doing here? And so I'm not pro or con on the matter. I just would like illumination. And I haven't seen yet any kind of study that suggests that if this is in place, what would it have meant? What does it mean down the road? We don't have primaries in our local elections. And that seems to be a primary concern or focus of ranked choice voting. So I just would like a discussion on it, and to maybe I can understand it better. I hope I can. And I'm open to suggestion or comment from the manager or colleagues about how we might want to proceed here.
Sure,
Mr.
thank
Mayor?
you. Member Anderson, yes. Who was that, Member Staunton?
Yes, if I could jump in, I'm the one who asked Manager Neal to put this on the agenda, and I'm glad actually that Member Anderson has taken it off, because as I look at it, I think it's incomplete. Actually, if you read the end of it, it doesn't contain a now therefore a clause that tells us what we're advocating for. So I apologize for that. So a couple of things. One is to Member Anderson's comments. I think the most important thing here is to give us the flexibility to decide in the future if this is right for us. And that's what the local options ranked choice voting bill that's currently at the legislature, from actually sponsored by Representative Elkins, who represents Edina and West Bloomington. So I am not looking to make a decision at this point about whether this is right for the city of Edina or not. But I do note that St. Louis Park, Minnetonka, Bloomington, and Minneapolis have all adopted this. And some of those cities are able to do that because they're charter cities and they have elections in odd number of years. But I think it's worth us considering it. And I would suggest, however, to Member Anderson's point, that the benefits that are articulated in the last whereas clause here are really not that applicable to us, because we have good voter turnout and we don't generally have primaries, and the costs are not really a big issue for us. So I would say I am a supporter of it, and the reason is because I think it provides an opportunity to give I think it encourages more civility in elections, because you're always looking for who's your second choice and third choice and fourth choice. And at the end of the process, you get folks who have the broadest base of support. But I think there's a lot of discussion that we have to have before we get there, including discussion from our city clerk about how to manage the elections and whether that's among all of us and among our residents about whether this is the right approach or not. But the thing that I'm supportive of is this opportunity for us to make that decision for ourselves in this community and not have it blocked by state statute that prohibits us from exploring this option. So I guess what I would suggest is we delete everything after benefits in that last whereas clause and just and then add a now therefore clause that provides that we are supportive of legislation that provides local control to cities like Edina to craft their election process.
Manager Neal, do you have any comment here? Otherwise, I've got a couple of comments and I want to make sure I understand where we're heading as well.
Yeah, so yes, there was a there was a now therefore be it resolved in the direction on the original. It must have just dropped off for some reason when we transferred this to the electronic world, but that is what it is. It's from Fair Vote Minnesota, and what it's advocating is for legislation for statutory cities to be able to host a referendum to make this decision, just like a charter city can. So it doesn't. Yes, there is. I think there's some advocacy for ranked choice voting in the resolution itself, but really what it's asking for is the opportunity for residents to be able to vote on it.
That was what I understood was the intent as well. And I thought for sure when I read this initially, wherever I read it, and I thought because I kept scrolling here looking for the resolution at the end and what the requested action was. And I thought I had seen it before, but I think the intent of it is that with respect to statutory cities, we'll just use St. Louis Park or Minnetonka, for example. I think they've had to go to the legislature to ask for permission to even talk about whether or not they wanted to do ranked choice voting.
Well, they're charter cities, so.
They're charter cities? Okay, so but with respect to any statutory city, and Member Staunton would know this as a city attorney, my understanding is that a statutory city can't even discuss ranked choice voting without the permission of the legislature to do so?
We would not have the authority to adopt ranked choice voting.
Yep. So what this resolution would be intending to do on a broad basis is to support a piece of legislation at the legislature that would give statutory cities the ability to at least have the discussion about whether ranked choice voting was right for them.
That's right. And we get lots of these kinds of resolutions this time of year that are looking for our support of one thing or another. This is one that this is one that we've gotten and brought in because it was consistent with one of the planks in your previously adopted legislative platform for the year.
So what do we want to do about the resolution clause? Member Staunton, you have some language crafted there?
So I don't know if Manager Neal has that original language, but.
Oh, good thought.
Can't put my fingers on it right now.
Okay. I'd like to hear it.
Drop those bullet points, yeah, because I'd like to hear it too. I'd like to have some firm language around.
And I'd be happy to extend it to the next meeting so that we can get the right language in front of everybody and be clear on what we're doing here.
That was my next question for you. Do you know whether we have 2 weeks? Or is this something?
I think we do. I don't think there's a tremendous urgency to this.
Okay. All right. Then should we just?
Yeah, I'd move to continue this to the next meeting.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Member Staunton moves, Member Anderson seconds, tabling resolution 2021-26 to our next city council meeting. Any further discussion?
Just one comment. Between now and our next meeting, when we reconsider this, I think a position paper of some kind, if there's more information out there that we can use to apply to our specific, to Edina, Minnesota, that would be very, very helpful for me. In the meantime, I'll promise to do some homework. Thank you.
I think that's a great idea. I'm sure we can find some materials.
And for me, I'm comfortable having a discussion about ranked choice voting, but I don't think passing this resolution is any form of endorsement of ranked choice voting. Because I don't understand it well enough either. All of my, I just have some subjective sense of it, but no objective ability to analyze it fully. So I'd want to talk about it carefully before we did anything. I'm with Member Anderson on that, but at least I'm willing to have that conversation.
Good.
All right. So we got a motion and a second to table this matter till our next council meeting. Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Clerk Allison.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Jackson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pierce,
Aye.
Councilmember Staunton,
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. This matter is held over until the next council meeting. And then we're done talking about the consent agenda, but I wanted to make a notation on the donations on behalf of the city of Edina, resolution 2021-27. The Edina Baseball Association donated to the Park and Rec Department almost $10,000, $9,920 for 4 portable pitching mounds for bullpens on fields 1 and 3 at Courtney Fields. Member Staunton's going to go out there and see if he's still got an arm left on him, practice on this portable pitching mound. But I just wanted to tell the Edina Baseball Association, thank you very much.
Spoiler alert, I don't.
Well, it's portable. Maybe you could drag it over to your backyard and do it.
Rubber bands are all snapped.
All right. Let's move on now to the next portion of the agenda, which is special recognitions and presentations. And we've got a COVID-19 update from Jeff Brown, our Community Health Administrator, and also Nick Kelly, who is the Public Health Director over at the Bloomington Public Health Department, where, of course, the city of Edina gets all of its public health services from, plus our own smaller department. So, Manager Neal, did you have any introductory comments, or should we just go directly to Jeff Brown?
We want to go directly to Jeff Brown and Nick Kelly.
Very good. Mr. Brown and Mr. Kelly, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Hovland, and good evening, members of the council. Like as the introduction said, I'm Jeff Brown, Community Health Administrator for the city, and also on the call is Nick Kelly from Bloomington Public Health. I'm going to share my screen here. And if all works how it's supposed to, I'm assuming you're looking at the presentation right now.
We are.
Thank you. So I'm going to go through just a few slides of some data over time, some case data that's specific to the city, and then turn it over to Nick for a few comments about vaccination and kind of vaccines going forward, and then we'll leave some time for questions. So it should be pretty brief, and please let us know if you have questions at the end. As far as case rates, this is Edina's case rates over time from the beginning of the pandemic. Obviously, we've had a couple spikes, the last one in November of last year, but it's seen rates decreasing over time. So we're in a good place, I guess, compared to that. And we are a little bit lower than the county rates, and then also a little bit lower than the state rates. So, but they all follow generally the same curve. This is broken down. The cases are broken down by likely exposure, which is changed over the course of the pandemic up to this point. You can see at the beginning of the pandemic, most of the cases and a lot of the testing was being done in congregate living settings, and that's the orange bar there in the first few months. And as cases and testing grew, you can see the community spread, which is the light blue and the dark blue, started to come into play there. So, and over time, you can see the purple bar is travel. It's always been a component, and we do have a decent number of cases in Edina associated with travel. it's basically broken down into, now we are in community spread. So there's not really a great point that you can point to. So as far as age ranges, this mirrors the previous chart. At the beginning of the pandemic, lots of folks 70 and over, and then in subsequent months, it's really spread out amongst different age groups. And as far as cases being broken down by race, this is local data, cases per 1,000 people in Edina. You can see the differences amongst different races. Any BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, or person of color is the first bar, and then Black and Hispanic being the second two, and then white on the end. And then the next slide breaks that out over the course of the pandemic to this point over time with those same categories. So you can see the difference between the races in this case, which we've heard about disparities, and it's the same in Edina. So, and as far as youth, we have some information basically breaking youth down into under 10 and between 11 and 18. It's following a similar curve, as the other groups. But thought it would be interesting for you to see the youth data. And then I'm going to turn it over to Nick to talk a little bit about vaccinations and how that's going.
Good evening. We've been able to operate 28 clinics so far providing vaccinations to individuals providing service in Edina, Bloomington, and Richfield. So 4,304 vaccines have been given. Almost all of those have gone into our healthcare, so that 1A category, whether they're firefighters, police officers providing that emergency medical service in the city of Edina, or individuals working in unaffiliated healthcare in Edina, or some of the school staff in Edina that are classified as healthcare workers based on the job they do. We've been able to essentially complete that aspect of the vaccine campaign and are moving on to additional aspects as we're now able to do about 1,000 vaccines a week. And Jeff, if you go to the next one, we can talk a little bit about where we're moving forward. As capacity continues to increase for vaccination, we're urging people to get vaccinated wherever they can. So the healthcare systems, pharmacies, state-run sites, or local public health are all options available to people. There's a rapidly growing capacity in the healthcare system and pharmacies and at state-run sites for widespread vaccination. Our role in public health this immediate next week is shifting to the remaining school staff and childcare staff that have not been served so far by the state sites. And then soon we're shifting to adults 65 and older. Our role in that is really focused on how do we meet equity issues with that vaccination. So there are individuals in Edina that, because of their transportation or access or how they interact with health systems, they're not going to be vaccinated readily through some of those systems. And we're going to be that backstop that public health always is, and make sure that our community is taken care of. And so those individuals will be able to get vaccinated, and we have a process of outreach and communication to really make sure we can go to those individuals or bring them to us to get vaccinated and serve them in our community.
So that's our quick update. I'm gonna exit out of here, and then we can take any questions that you may have.
So I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
We had a discussion, and I can't remember when, but about the public sites. So I know that the Mall of America was named as a vaccination site, and then there was some discussion about whether we'd have a mobile unit or something like that. Can you give us an update on where the public will be able to find these vaccines?
Certainly. The Mall of America was announced as a semi-permanent state site that will continue to increase in capacity, which is going to be serving our part of the community. That was something we worked really closely with our state partners to make sure that happened. What we're looking at is the ability for us to go to places where we think there's going to be a challenge with people going to one of those sites or coming to one of our locations for vaccination. Similar to the way we do it with flu shots, where we go out to certain complexes or apartments in the community to vaccinate individuals that may not have gotten a flu shot in other ways. We're going to be doing something very similar with that with the COVID vaccine.
Terrific. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if you're asking a question, you're on mute.
Microphone's not on. There you go.
Thank you. I went on mute as I was rustling papers here. I thought I should get on mute. Mr. Kelly, can you tell me how many doses of vaccine does Bloomington Public Health receive per week?
We're receiving around 1,000 vaccines a week right now. So we got 1,100 vaccines actually today for the clinics we're going to be operating this week.
It sounds like you're getting everything that you receive into somebody's arm, because you're going to do 1,000 a week.
We are doing everything we can, and staff are working very diligently to meet the governor's goal of 90% in 72 hours. We're achieving 100% of vaccine administered in 72 hours of receipt.
Very commendable. And then as the quantity of vaccine increases over time, do you feel like you have the capacity? Do you think you have the capacity to be able to expand your ability to get more people vaccinated?
We have the capacity to expand our vaccine a bit. Majority of that increase in capacity is going to go to the health systems and the pharmacy side. So we are going to become more targeted in reaching communities and individuals in Edina that don't have access to some of those other systems to make sure that they're vaccinated in the same time frame.
Okay. Is that part of some master strategy led by Minnesota Department of Health, or could you talk a little bit more about that?
So it's a little bit of the state strategy is to vaccinate as quickly as possible. A lot of the local public health end is looking at it from the equity, the health impacts, and the disproportionate impacts we're seeing in our community, and trying to be extremely focused now that vaccines becoming more plentiful with a lot of our partners to make sure that nobody gets left behind with vaccination. And so we're seeing most of our local public health partners really continue to do some of their mass sites, while also becoming very targeted in reaching communities that may not have access to some of those pharmacies or health system sites, just to make sure that we're addressing the health equity issues that we see with disparities in COVID.
Good. Excellent. Mr. Brown, we've got a significant number of seniors in Edina that live in multifamily housing. Some may have mobility, some do not. Are you developing a strategy so that we make sure that we get to all of those folks, or at least be able to find out what percent of them are getting vaccinated and what percent want to be vaccinated?
That is the top of our priority list right now, as Nick was saying about targeting and finding those folks that aren't getting access in some other way. We are currently trying to brainstorm to sort out how we can do that, whether that's through places where they worship, or places they visit, or our community center, or, the Edina Community Center, or how do we get in touch with these folks that are hard to reach? And so we're exploring all those avenues, and that's our priority, is trying to find those folks, because as Nick said, the people that have this on their radar and are going to go to their provider as soon as the vaccine is available, our doses are probably not going to go to them. We're trying to use our doses to find those that are falling through the cracks. We have had a few calls from older residents that live, in a single family home on their own and have mobility issues. So we're keeping tabs on them, and we'll be contacting them when the vaccine becomes available for them.
All right, thank you. Did that prompt any other questions from council members?
Mr. Mayor, Yep. So I just had a comment and a question on your cases by race slide. I've not often seen BIPOC and then having Black non-Hispanic separated from BIPOC. And so I'm just curious the reason behind that for this particular graph. And then I'll let you respond and I'll make my comment.
We do that with some of our health data to get a little bit more specific and targeted so that we can do more interventions. So we see that across the 3 cities we serve, where BIPOC helps us understand where we're seeing some of the gaps. And then when we break it down by different race or ethnicities, we can see opportunities for us to do more interventions in specific communities.
So just to follow up, so then in the definition of BIPOC is Black Indigenous people of color. So is the Black non-Hispanic then, is that included in the BIPOC number? And you're just separating it?
It is correct. So the BIPOC is all inclusive. We break it out a little bit further to get more targeted.
I gotcha. Okay, thank you. That makes sense. And then the other comment I just wanted to make, I think it's really incumbent on us to not let statistics like this become desensitized to it. Last thing I would want is for my community to end up like some of the communities in Colorado, where we just see health disparities continue to get bigger and bigger. We focus on getting vaccines to those who have wealth, who have access. And then in Edina, when you look at this data, this kind of says to me that we're trending in the same direction, where we are ending up with a clear example of those health disparities by race, actually. And then I would also just offer that it definitely as well is going to be a socioeconomic issue as well. And so my question, similar to Mayor's question on the elderly, what are we doing to specifically target communities where we know we have disparities that are related to race?
Similar to what Jeff had talked about, that is how we're pivoting. And so we are working with different partners in the community, different avenues of our staff are used to working in the community, used to working with some of our residents that are experiencing those health disparities. And so we're utilizing those relationships to make sure that we're making sure vaccine gets to those communities as quickly as possible. We are a little constrained by, we have to vaccinate adults over 65. And we know that many of the individuals that we see that disparity data in with COVID are not quite 65 yet. And so we're making sure that not only can we vaccinate those that are 65 that are suffering from those disparities with COVID data, but that the rest of the community, when they're eligible, we've already been in touch in building that capacity so that there's that demand and ready for it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Mr. Brown, I'm just thinking about different strategies for how to find folks, whether it's a racial disparity issue or it's an age issue, a mobility issue. I guess we'd like to have you stay in contact with the council a little bit more frequently on this now as more vaccine becomes available and we start getting through all the folks that are older than 65. It would be good to be right on top of this, because I think our goal would be consistent with the goal of Bloomington Public Health, and that is to make sure that every time they get a shipment of vaccine in on a weekly basis, 100% of that vaccine has gone into somebody's arm within 72 hours. I think that's really impressive. I'd like to make sure that we keep up that level of performance, because it's going to keep a lot of people healthy, and it's going to get the economy rebounding quicker. So thank you for that report. Did that prompt anything else, Member Staunton? I see you contemplating a question.
Yes, could I just add one comment to that?
Yes, please.
Or a question actually for Nick or Jeff. Are you utilizing the connector information or database for any of the outreach that you're doing?
We do get on a weekly basis. It hopefully will become more frequent. Data from the Minnesota Department of Health based on the jurisdictions we serve. So we get the data for Edina for individuals that go into that connector. That also goes to health partners and others too. That are it's a list that everybody's working to get down to the smallest number possible as quickly as we can.
And I just say, I applaud the staff for having a link to that on our website. And it's just worth mentioning here that that's if you haven't and you're watching this and you're trying to figure out how to get tapped into the system, that's one way to do it. You can go on, you enter your information, and then you're in the database. So I assume folks like Nick and Jeff are reaching out to you, or health partners or whoever it might be. But it's it's as many points as we can get for connecting people.
Good. I would think the building managers, are you reaching out to them, Jeff?
Yep, that was one of the first things we thought of is with our new rental licensing program. Now we have points of contact with lots of multi-unit buildings. So we were going to utilize as many points of contact as we have through licensing and different interfaces that we have with residents. So that was one of our main ideas as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. Well, keep us posted, and we'd like to hear from you maybe every couple of. Well, I guess we meet every couple of weeks, so I guess we don't need to hear from you every meeting, but it would be good to hear from you once a month, I think.
Sounds good.
Or at least have you submit a report to the city manager so we know the status on everything. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for being here with us. And thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, gentlemen. We're now going to move on to the next item on the agenda in the reports and recommendations portion. And that is we've got a final form of the Street Funding Task Force report. And of course, we had residents that served on this Street Funding Task Force, led by our former colleague Ann Swenson, who was the chair, from the Concord neighborhood, David Alkire, who's now going on the Planning Commission from the Minnehaha Woods neighborhood. Those are folks that have been previously assessed. Chip Howard from the Countryside neighborhood, not previously assessed. Kathy Kelly from the Normdale Park neighborhood, previously assessed. Hamid Motadi from the Prospect Knolls neighborhood, not previously assessed. Matt Shearer was on the Transportation Commission and Indian Hills neighborhood, previously had been assessed. And then Ralph Zickert from the Lake Cornelia neighborhood. All those folks, again, thank you for that great work that you did. And Director Milner, I think, is going to present the report on behalf of the task force. And we have many members here of the task force. I see Chair Swenson is with us right at the top of the screen where she should be, and serving in so many capacities in the city of Edina. So thanks for being with us. And Director Milner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Thanks for that introduction. And yeah, I think most of the members of the task force are here this evening to assist and answer any questions, but I have the honor of presenting the final recommendations of the task force. So we'll talk about a little bit about remind people about how the task force was formed. We'll give you an update on the public engagement report since we last spoke in November, what the task force learned, and then the final recommendations. So you've already introduced the task force. Thanks, Mayor, and their neighborhoods. This was the schedule. So we started the task force work in June of 2020. We presented at a work session in November 2020 and got some feedback from the council at that point. And then the task force finished the report and recommendations, and we're here tonight to present that. Staff anticipates you're going to use these recommendations in your council retreat discussions on the 22-23 budget. And then following those discussions, get some direction to staff to bring back the assessment policy, the street funding policy for an update based on those discussions. So a public hearing is not legally required to change that policy, but if the council feels that's necessary, I guess staff would really like to know that. They're trending towards that. So we received 300 plus points of information from residents. I think we've heard a lot of different things. I don't know if a public hearing you would hear anything different from all the stuff that's in the appendix of this report. But if you do want to have a public hearing, please let us know. So again, they've conducted 16 meetings from June until tonight's number 17. Starting with meeting number 5, all meetings were recorded and live streamed on Edina YouTube. The purpose was from the charge, and that was to develop recommendations for street funding. The task force created a vision statement, and that was to develop a funding solution that was equitable, was able to maintain Edina's roadways to the city standards, and is also financially and legally sustainable. So the public engagement summary, what did we hear from the public? So we based it on the community engagement and equity statements. We designed a process that started in mid-December and ended on January 19th. So over a month of input was collected. There was a press release, story, and the episode of Agenda Edina. There was an article in Edition Edina, social media posts, and in total on Better Together Edina, there was over 2,000 site visits. And we received 313 feedback forms, plus additional emails, and all those forms are in the appendix of the report. So the recommendations that we seek feedback on were the two that the council directed the task force to get feedback on. And it was option 1 with 50% special assessments, 50% tax levy dollars, and option 2 was 100% tax levy dollars. And both of those transitioned over 16 years. So what was heard? So there was definitely differences in what we heard if you were previously assessed or not previously assessed. So I won't read these all, but there was some pretty common comments about, I just paid for my street. How is it fair for me to potentially have to pay for other streets? Can I get a refund or adjustments in my future taxes? Let's just keep the current system in place until all the streets are reconstructed. From people not previously assessed, they discussed finding a way for a transition to homeowners that have been previously assessed. And then that everybody should have some skin in the game. They should all contribute because road reconstruction is a basic city function. So many of those comments, all of the comments are in the appendix, and there's a summary in the report text. What was interesting is all the comments we received were from residential properties. So 100% of the properties were residential properties. Again, all those feedback forms are in the report. 313 forms from the Better Together platform. And we did ask what was their preferred option between these two. And 58% preferred option 1, 42% preferred option 2. So the task force, we had a lot of discussions, a lot of meetings, and the understandings that they came up with following this process were that the current method of street assessment is both fair and unfair at the same time. It's fair that all residents are subject to the same rules. It's unfair that a resident may pay significantly more or less based solely on the density of their neighborhood, the subsoil quality, or the need for retaining wall construction. It's unfair that some people will live 30 or more years and never experience a special assessment. It's also unfair that some people will experience more than one special assessment if they move within the city. And it's unfair that the current policy assumes all properties within a neighborhood reconstruction project benefit equally, and that properties outside of the project are assumed to receive no benefit. So the example for that is the current policy allocates all the costs to the residents that live on the street, while other residents get to use the same street free of charge. We also came to learn that the current method of 100% assessments is an outlier in Twin Cities metro communities, that any change to the current system will be unfair to those residents that have previously experienced a special assessment. The 100% assessment strategy is no longer legally and financially sustainable, a change in the policy needs to occur. And they also learn there's no legal way to refund past assessments and no legal way to tax previously assessed properties at different rates. So again, the recommendations in the report are these two options that we've been talking about, the 50% assessments or 100% tax levy dollars over 16 years. The task force also wanted to provide some additional financial calculations. So in the appendix, there's some different calculations based on transition years of 6-year transition and an 11-year transition. So if you're interested to see those impacts in the different years, those can be found in the appendix. The other recommendations of the task force are to remove subcut year 1. So costs for subcut should no longer be included in assessments. It should be paid by taxes year 1. Same thing for retaining walls, no longer included in assessments, paid by taxes in year 1. Two other recommendations that the city staff should draft a street light policy. The minimum would be established where we should require street lights. And an example could be active routes to school for safety. Establish those areas where we should have lights and not have a option for the members of the community where they live to fill out the surveys that we do with our street reconstruction program. And then number 4 is city staff should draft a policy for eligible expenses for the pool of annual tax levy dollars that are allocated for street reconstruction. And those are many of the items that we wanted to pull out of the assessment: subcut, walls, and then lights, and maybe a few other miscellaneous. I'll get into a little bit about the financial impacts of each of these options over 16 years. So the first one is the 50% option. On the left-hand side, year 1 is the first year of transition to remove the subcut dollars. In years 2 through 16 is that transition to get to 50% assessments. The titles on the top for each column. First one is the reduction in special assessments by year. So if we increase the levy to cover subcuts at $950,000, the reduction in special assessments that first year would be 21%. The levy would increase $950,000, and that'd be an estimated percent increase in the levy of 2.3% in year 1. The last two columns are the impacts to the median value home. So that first column is what is the actual dollar tax impact. So to remove subcuts year 1 would be $37.90, so just under $38. And would see their city taxes increase by roughly 4.5%. Now, during all those years of transitions from year 2 to 16, the assessments would reduce 1.9% per year. The levy would increase in dollars from $100,000 to $211,000. That's because of inflation. The levy percent would increase 0.2% every year. So that would be baked into the levy increases every year. And the tax increase on that median value home would be just over $4 a year. And that tax percent increase would be 0.28%. Now, this is the same table for the 100% tax levy option. Same columns, same analysis over 16 years. You'll see year 1 is the same. The two options, year 1 is exactly the same impacts. Years 2 through 16, these were the differences when you go from a 50% assessment to a 0% assessment. So the reduction in assessments by year would be 5.3%. The levy would increase between $260,000 and $510,000 a year. The levy would increase, those increases would be 0.65% of the levy increase. And the last two columns are, again, those impacts to the median value home. So it'd be just over $10 a year in additional taxes per year, or a 0.67 increase in their taxes per year. The task force also felt it was important to show the cumulative tax impacts on that median value home. So again, it's the two options on the left column. The top rows are the years. So year 1, year 6, 11, and 16. So if you look at year 1, that first year of tax impacts is that $37.90. Year 2 would be that number plus roughly $4. So it's $38 plus 4, you had $42. So you keep adding up the cumulative tax impacts, and by year 6, you're at $292. And after the entire transition, you're at $1,120 is the estimate. Below that row, you can see the estimated assessments during that transition. So it's slowly ratcheting down from $10,000 year 0 to $5,000 in year 16. And then the tax on that medium value home in that final year of transition would be $102 for street reconstruction. Same analysis for option 2. The first year is the same, $37.90. And then the cumulative impacts on years 6, 11, and 16. So in year 16, that home would have paid $1,865 in taxes for street reconstruction. You can see that the assessment in year 16 is now $0 for that option. The medium value home would have paid $195 for street reconstruction in year 16. And then the note on the very bottom, the difference in the cumulative tax impacts between the two options, 1 and 2, is estimated at $745. So if you go to a 50% option or 100% tax option, the difference over 16 years is $745. Other topics that the policy will have to address is our municipal state aid assessment policy. So currently we assess 20%. Task force is recommending that we match the option on local streets. So whichever one of those two options are matched on the local side, we would do the same thing on state aid. So if it's a 50% option, we would lower that assessment to 10% on a state aid street. We had lots of discussions on pet fences, irrigation system, and regular fences. Those things in the right of way that probably shouldn't be there but are. We found that it's such a very small portion of the cost of the project that we felt they felt that we should continue to fund that as part of the project and just do those repairs within the projects. And then the other property classes. Our assessment policy also considers apartments, churches, commercial, retail. So again, we would match the option that the council selects for the local streets. We would do that same cost split on these other property classes, but keep the REU, the residential equivalent unit calculations for those. So in conclusion, the street funding is a difficult and challenging topic. Priorities and funding understandings, they change over time. And those changes require changes to the funding methods that may not align with resident expectations. Task force feels the two funding options meet the objectives of the task force charge. We would just like to say a huge thank you to the task force and all the members here that are listed and provided all their time and energy into this opportunity. And with that, I'll hand it over to Scott Neal for some closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. I just want to reiterate that as well. This is one of those policy issues that is difficult in all cities, regardless of how they go about it. It's a challenging topic, and the fact that we had a number of residents volunteer their personal time to assist us by studying the issue and bringing some options back to the council really is a testament to the civic pride of Edina, I think. And so I just also want to thank them as well, and really just kind of get to some of the council discussion so we can answer your questions tonight.
Oh, Mayor, looks like your microphone's off.
Thank you. Questions from council members for the task force? I'm sure there are some. Yes, Member Sutton.
Thanks for the report, Chad, and I echo the thanks to the task force members. It's really important work, and I know it was time consuming and detailed, so thanks for all your efforts. I'm wondering, Chad, if you might have handy those two graphs that you referred to that are in Appendix D, showing kind of the progression over time. I just wanted to make sure everybody saw those and ask a couple of questions about them if I could.
Yep. Okay, this one was Appendix C or D?
D is the one, the two, yeah, that one, and then the next one. If you can maybe just explain what this is doing, I think it's a helpful slide,
Sure.
both this for the 50% and the next one for the 100%.
Yeah, this was a way to show if we have the average assessment that we found was $8,000 in 2007. So we thought we would show the assessment with impacts to inflation over 10,000 in year 2020. And then let's say the council decides to make a change to the policy. This first jump is that 21% reduction in the assessment if we remove subcuts. And then there's that transition of 1.9% or roughly 2% for the next 15 years to get down to a 50% assessment. So you see we started at 8,000, we're at 4,000. And then after that's applying a 2% inflation rate as we go forward from 2037. The next one, similar analysis, starting with $8,000. Year one, it drops at 21%. And then from there, it drops about 5% a year until 2037, where we get down to a point where there's 0 assessments in that option 2 with 100% taxes.
Yeah, and that's helpful. I would point out just a couple of observations, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the average, obviously, I mean, we've got it over slightly over 10,000 right about now. But obviously, we've got some projects that come in way higher than that and some that come in lower, which is, of course, what an average means. But I just want people to realize that it doesn't mean that on the first one, if we went to the 50-50, that, you know, everybody would be at, you know, that less than 6,000. We might still have some that are above 10,000 or more after that if we were at a 50-50.
Yeah.
Is that right?
It's a great point. The task force wanted to give the council some additional financial calculations. So we actually included a $25,000 assessment and ran some financial calculations in the appendix. So you both have 8 or 10,000. I'll find it for you.
Okay, that'd be great, because that sounds like another good piece of data.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you. Those were just the observations. I just wanted to walk through that a little bit and make sure I was reading it the right way.
Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, first, I just want to mention that I'm deeply appreciative of the hard work of the task force and its chair and Director Milner. I know that this was time-consuming and stressful. I know that. And you've been dealing not simply with the numbers and the concepts, but you're also dealing with the concept of fairness. And that's a hard thing to get your arms around. And it's a hard thing to talk to your neighbors about. It's a hard thing to deal with as a community. It's a hard thing to deal with as council, because it's primary in our approach. We try to be fair about everything, and yet it's sometimes it's not possible to meet everyone's expectation of fairness. The overriding factor that we deal with is the state regulations that surround how we govern special assessments. And so when we look at state statute 429 and its statement about the special benefit creating similar benefit in the assessed property, that's a difficult thing to work with as the cost of assessments continue to climb and climb and climb. So I know what you've been struggling with, and not everyone can understand that initially, but hopefully we bring this out further as we come closer to making a decision and moving forward, because you know what? Our streets are old, our infrastructure is dated, and we have to fix our house, just like every homeowner does. You got to fix your house. If you got to put on a roof, you put on a roof. It costs a certain amount of money, and we don't like to spend it. And so there it is. But again, I'm deeply appreciative of it. Thank you so much. And I really look forward to dealing with it on our retreat.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to repeat what everybody else has said. This is an incredible report, and I want to thank you for the depth of information and the thoughtfulness that went into this. So the first thing is I just kind of want to make a statement for people in the public to understand, and Mr. Milner, Director Milner, I'll end this with a question, and that is, it's my understanding that the increase in costs of street reconstruction is pretty much intact with inflation, that there's no external driver that's pushed up the cost of street reconstruction for us, that this is just sort of costs go up over time. Is that a fair assumption?
Yep. Generally, we haven't found anything other than that. I mean, every project is so unique and have so many bid items that it's tough. Really, the biggest driver is oil prices. You know, our projects use a lot of oil-based products with plastic pipes in the asphalt pavement.
But $100 assessed today in 20, that we're talking roughly that inflation has not been the cause of the increase of cost. So there's no fairness wedge to be found that inflation has gone up faster in street reconstruction than it has in general, so that a dollar is a dollar, and we're paying for the same thing that we were paying for 10 years ago, is a fairly good estimate that inflation's not driving this. It's just more expensive to build streets now.
Yeah, we had an outside consultant look at all of our construction data since 2007, and they, inflation they came up with was 2% since that time. Pretty consistent. It does spike and dip based on oil prices, the economy, but generally it's been pretty consistent.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. The second question I have, and this is kind of a legal question, one of the charges is to keep this legally sustainable. And my question is, because I think part of what's driving this, and the people who said, I don't want any change, that we have to change because it's not legally sustainable to keep 100% assessment. And my question is, taking the subcut out, is that enough of a drop that it takes away that legal challenge that's out there, that potential legal challenge? Are we going to be legally sustainable at this rate of decrease in the assessment, or are we still looking at some liability issues out there?
I think through the transition, we maybe have some issues passing that benefit test, but it really depends on the type of project. If it's a nice blocked out lot by lot project, it's much easier to divide the costs out. It's the neighborhoods with more streets, larger lots that will be difficult to do it. So a faster transition would get rid of that potential legal test to meet that benefit test.
So I guess that's my question, and I would direct this to Chair Swenson maybe. Why the 16 years on the transition? And I know when we're talking about 100% reduction going to taxes, that kind of mirrors the amount of time to pay off now. But when we're looking at the 50%, that seems like a pretty slow drawdown. And I wonder why the committee stuck with the 16-year drawdown on option one.
Well, you saw the chart that had the 16-year drawdown, but you will also see charts that give you 6 years or 11 years. If you want to
Can you
look
tell
at
me
what
where
it
those
is,
are?
Chad, you'll have to.
Yep. They're not charts, they're just tables of financial data. So it's appendix.
So we gave you choices to be able to talk about. Originally, when we went to, we were at 15 years because that's currently what someone pays if they're going to pay a yearly amount on their assessment. They are assessed for 15 years. You know, when you're trying to do the issue of fairness, that was one of the things that we pulled out of the fact that there are people paying right now, and we'll start paying even next spring when you assess streets for 15 years. The subcut we all felt was really important because that was a huge fairness issue that had come out the first year. So on a lot of projects, there's a high subcut. On not all projects is there a high subcut. So you may want to look at doing a shorter period of time, depending on which direction you want to go with either the first or the second choice.
Okay.
Appendix J has those other transition times.
Terrific.
I think the main thing is you can't just pull subcut out and not do anything else, because that won't get you there.
Right.
Correct.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Member Pierce, any questions? Pierce, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I just would echo my colleagues, and I think this was very sound work that was done, and definitely appreciate the effort there. I didn't have a question per se, but just a statement. I do think that when we're doing work like this, I applaud you for doing the legal assessments based on some of the feedback that we got from the community. And then I believe on the one slide, you had 313 responses to the survey. And just that's maybe not a statistical representation of everyone. But to come back with that group to say roughly, I think it was like 60-40 option one versus option two. I think that tells you that you're putting together good options for everyone that can now make a decision based on fair and equitable for them personally. And then I think you can extrapolate that to the larger community. So I just think that that was well done. And it's just one litmus test that says, you know, we did some really sound work and put together some really solid options. And so I definitely appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Pierce. Member Staunton, did you have any other questions or comments?
I just had one other nugget that I wanted to note that jumped out at me, and I appreciated all the facts that were in here. On page 16, there was a discussion of how many tax-exempt properties there are. And I was surprised to learn that out of over 21,000 properties in the city, only 107 are non-city tax-exempt properties, which was kind of surprising to me. So that's less, even by my remedial Illinois math, that's less than 0.5% of the properties are non-city tax-exempt. So just one other piece of information that jumped out at me.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, and I think generated really from people writing with this issue with a lot of emotion around it about what they perceive to be fairness. And I think that Director Milner mentioned if you've already been assessed, this is where it gets more emotional because you want other people to have that same wonderful experience of being assessed. So if the average assessment, this is what I heard a few times, if the average assessment is approximately $10,000 now, and I think in the session we had, let's see, it was in November of 2020, we had a meeting with the task force, and I think Chad was asked the question, how long to complete reconstruction of all the roadways, and you said 20 to 25 years. So if you took that average assessment at $10,000 and you moved that out with an inflationary factor of 2% over the next 20 to 25 years, one question I had was received was, does that meet the 429 test or potentially meet the 429 test? Or alternatively, the argument was, well, take that average assessment, make the pain a little bit less. Keep that in place over the period of time it takes us to get through all of our streets once so that everybody has done this at least on the average. And then you go to some other methodology. Did the task force look at that issue at all?
Well, I could answer. I mean, we looked at the benefits. We felt the group and the discussions we had with our legal team that there's still going to be outliers. It all depends on the project and when in the transition it's going to happen. So I think the mayor, your comments about, can we get through the first replacement cycle and then do we have to make a change to everybody? Or do we go to the option where there wouldn't be any legal concerns after the transition is the 100% tax option and just get special assessments out of the equation? That would get rid of all the discussion about legally sustainable.
All right, and then I had a question for, this is maybe a real world sort of example of it, but let's say that Chair Swenson's house is the median price home in Edina and it's $550,000. I think you've run some numbers off the median valued home. I just want to make sure I understand. So she's already paid. 4 of the people on the task force have already paid a special assessment. I want to ask them some questions in a minute here, but so what's the impact on Member Swenson and her husband, Chair Swenson, over time? How do I compute that? Do I look at that $37.90 number, and then year 2 through 16, $4.01.
Yep. So every year that tax would increase $4. So it'd start at, let's say, $38. Year 2, it's $42. Year 3, it's $46, and it would just keep increasing $4 every year. So that table 2 on page 15 of the report shows in total the cumulative for the 50% option be $1,120 for street recon.
$1,120.
Yep, to get to the point where we're at 50% assessments. Now, if you do that faster, page 15.
Yeah. That was on page 16?
15.
15, okay, thank you. All right, I'll take a look at that before we have our conversation at our work session. And then start with Chair Swenson, and also task force members Al Kyer, Kelly, and I think Matt Shearer. Just your observations about how you feel about the fact that you've already paid a full assessment or in the process of paying a full assessment, and what you think about going to some alternative method, even though you've paid. I see Matt Shearer leaning forward. You can hardly wait to answer that question.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Mayor and council members. So, I'm in a unique position where we were assessed at the home that we formerly owned over in the country club area of Edina. And then we actually moved to Indian Hills, where we have not yet been assessed in this area. So I'm up to be assessed twice. I personally, when I used to work at the legislature and you came to talk to us, Mr. Mayor, my belief would be that 100% city covered cost or some sort of a street utility fee is probably the fairest approach. The tricky part is that we're halfway through this. So I feel like that there needs to be some sort of a system where we continue this until we've completed the whole project, and hopefully in 25 years we can make more of a 100% approach. That's just my personal belief. I think that, my opinion of it, I was in favor of the 50-50 plan over 16 years, and I think that that's a fair approach to it. That was my viewpoint, but I think, generally speaking, I'm comfortable paying it again, and I understand why it's necessary.
All right, thank you, Matt. And then Chair Swenson?
That fairness issue that you're talking about, that was really one of our early whole meetings were spent discussing fairness. And I think your policy, whatever you decide to do, is going to be a little fair and a little unfair, and there's no way around that. You can't have 25 years of doing it the one way that we've done it and then know that we have to change it now. We don't have a choice. We have a really good system, and I want everyone to know this, especially member Jackson and Pierce, who haven't been on very long, but Chad looks at all the streets. We do drills into the streets. We have a pavement index on every street, so we know which streets need to be done in what order. So it's not that we're just picking and choosing winners or losers. Obviously, the streets that we've done in the first 25 years were the ones that we built the longest ago. They tend to be the ones in the east part of the city, where the city was started being built. So we have a very logical, very engineering driven way to choosing the streets. So you need to stay focused on that. It feels, like maybe when we're going to bigger streets, we have to change. That's really not the case. It's that the policy that we've been doing for years no longer works. And that's really what you have to stay focused on as you go into changing this. And good luck. I've sat in your seats. It's not an easy vote.
Yes, you have, and you always were willing to make the tough decisions. And Member Al Kyer. Then I'm going to go to Member Kelly.
Yeah, I think my concern, Mayor and members, at the outset was how am I going to explain this to my neighbors who, like our family, paid a pretty sizable assessment just a few years ago, and we're friendly enough that they know that I'm working on this project, and ultimately I would have to explain it to them. So that's why I concluded in the end that anything that we could do to moderate or stretch out the pain for those folks who had already paid significant, any assessment at all, would be a good thing, because then I could say to my neighbors, hey, we really had to do this because of the way the world has changed and the legal sustainability requirement that we had as a team. But it's not a lot of money. We're going to stretch it out over a longer period of time. We're going to go to 50-50 rather than 100, and it's manageable. And I'm from the conversations that I've had with them about the direction we're taking, the numbers really are. It's not that it's a trivial number, but it's a manageable number in the universe of at least the folks on my block. So I feel pretty good about the accommodation that we've made.
Thank you. Member Kelly? I think you're on mute, Member Kelly. There you go.
There we go. We too have been assessed. And when I look at the responses from the survey, I mean, people that have been assessed, some of those responses are, very, very emotional, very caustic. I don't feel that way. I've learned a lot working on this task force about what the issues are and so forth. So I don't feel that way, but I can certainly understand how they do when, the council's going to have to deal with all that emotion out there. But I think one key reason we went with the 50-50 plan over 15 years was that was the best solution we could find to give some relief to people that have already paid. We asked our legal people some pretty good questions about, what can be done, refunding money, different kind of tax structure, all those things are in the report, but there was really nothing that could be done, and we accepted that. Like I said, that was a key reason for the 50-50 plan going over the 15 years. And again, the 15 years, like Ann said, too, aligns with how long people are paying. So I think if we stick with that, it's probably the best way to relieve some of that emotion and anger that you'll read when you read all the survey comments.
All right. Thank you, Kathy. Director Milner?
Yeah, I've heard the 50-50 option a few times. I just want to make sure the council, there's two options for consideration here. There was different views on the task force, so I want to make sure that there's two options here. There was no vote or anything by the task force to pick one or the other. So I just want to make sure you're hearing the views of the whole task force and that there are two options. And with any of these options, if you want different numbers, myself or Don Urim, we could put together different numbers and have those available at any time for the council.
Yeah, good thought. Well, I think, you had pointed out, I think in your presentation that at the end of the day, the difference between option one and option two was it under $1,000?
Yep.
Yeah,
745.
700 something. Yeah. Well, I'd like to be able to answer that question for folks, about the average. Few folks writing to me and saying, take the average, 10,000, put an inflation multiplier on it, keep that in place until we get all done with the streets the first time through, and see what that looks like.
Well, that's a different.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Mayor. That's a whole different analysis. We didn't look at just holding a flat rate of 10,000 with inflation. That'd be a different analysis than what was done as part of the study. We looked at just cutting it in half. Holding it a flat rate is not as equitable because you're gonna 10,000 for this property value and 10,000 for this much higher property value. So there was some discussion on that flat rate, but that got kicked out pretty quickly by the task force.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Member Sutton?
I count 3 other task force members that are with us that I'd like to hear from as well, their perspectives. I assume by process of elimination, they're the ones who have not yet been assessed, but.
That's right. So we have Chip Howard. We could start with Chip and then go to Hamid and then Ralph.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure working with this group. I've lived in town in 2 different houses for about 35 years, and I've escaped the assessment monger. And I don't expect where I'm living today. I'll move from, and I don't expect we'll ever get assessed where I am now. And I don't think that's fair for me to see all the other streets get improved, and I don't have to pay a penny to see that happen. The thing that I wanted to think about here as we're approaching this is, where do we want to be at the end of the day? What do we think is the end place that's the best place? And let's try to get there today. We don't want to redo this again in 5 or 10 years. Let's figure out a pathway to get to where we want to be at the end of the day. And if that's a 50-50 or 100, that's what you got to, decide. But I don't think they're, halfway measures to appease people at this stage are going to, stand the test of time. I'm more of the 100% camp. I think either one works. It's better than what we've got today. I think the 50-50 may be more acceptable to a broader range of people. If you look at those 313 surveys, it is a 60-40 split, but I think there probably more of those 300 were in the assessed group than the non-assessed group. So there's more people who, came back saying option one because there were more in the assessed group that responded. So if you weighted it based on how many responded, from assessed or non-assessed, I think you might come up with more of a 50-50 than a 60-40.
All right. Thank you for those thoughts. And then Hamid Motadi.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, the council members. Yes, I live in an area where we are about to be assessed, I guess, soon. One of I think that this is a very complicated question, as everyone has attested to. It's not an easy question. The fairness question, is out there. And one of the ways of looking at it, and I think perhaps from the perspective of the assessed or to be assessed member, I could vouch for that perspective, is that if you distribute the pain on both sides, we know that there's pain on both sides. It seemed to me, and that by having a long 16-year process, the transition process, the pain isn't quite equally divided. As we saw, for example, we have the amount of cumulative tax liability of the $10,000 home under taxation, either 100% or 50%. 50 is only about over $1,000. The cost, of course, on the properties to be assessed are much higher, especially if you happen to be about an average value home, but in a high assessed neighborhood. So if let's say you're a $600,000 home, but you're living in a neighborhood it's going to have a $30,000 assessment. So those cost differentials, the way in which the burden, that pain is shared, it seems to be, it would be, at least my personal perspective would be that the shorter period of transition, the more evenly is that pain distributed between the assessed and the non-assessed groups. So I personally, my personal opinion is that even shorter than 16 years, I personally think it might be 5 or 6 year period would distribute the pain more equally. But I'm certainly in the minority in that perspective within the task force, of course.
All right, thanks, Hamid. And then Ralph, you get to do the cleanup work.
Well, I'll try not to do a stump speech this time.
Well, it was a good one. I can still remember it.
Yeah. Well, so I guess when you look at what the council or what the task force has found, we all believe that the 100% assessment is no longer legally sustainable under the state statute. And so we needed to find alternatives to that. And we felt that the two alternatives that we brought forward best represent, options that are viable to the council. Much like Chip, I've lived in Edina for 30 years. I left right before my street was assessed at my first house. I came to this house right after it was assessed. And so I have not experienced an assessment. And if I live here for another 25 years, I still won't have an assessment. And that's why for me to say that, well, let's wait for 25 years to change, we're going to be exactly in the same position we are today if we wait for 25 years to change. I think that one of the key things for the council to look at is not so much the average of the 10,000, but the outliers, because the outliers are what are going to cause non-compliance with the 429 statute. It's not the average $10,000. I mean, if it only costs $10,000 to do a street assessment, we would not be looking at a change from a city standpoint. We're looking at a change because of the outliers. And as I believe, Ann talked about, initially we did the older streets in Edina, which were smaller lots. Now we're moving, to the west, and they're much larger lots. And it's lot size together with subcut that are driving this huge increase in assessments. It isn't even inflation. The key drivers, when you look at project to project, are subcut and lot size. And so I'd like to end it by saying thank you to Ann for herding this set of cats through, to come up with two very, very viable solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Well said. So I think that it was important not only for the council to hear all of your comments, but I think that this is understanding this is a recorded meeting, and I think many of our residents will be able to now see how you folks were thinking about this individually and then coming up with these collective ideas that seem to be the best pathway under difficult circumstances. So I think it's important. Any other questions that have surfaced for council members, for any of the task force members at this point in time? All right. Is there, we got a memo from the city manager this afternoon suggesting that the motion should be that we receive the street funding task force final report and recommendations. Is there a motion to that effect, that we receive the street funding task force final report and recommendations?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by member Staunton, second by member Anderson, that we receive the street funding task force final report and recommendations. Any further discussion?
Thank you again to everybody. I mean, I know we've all said it, but it's been inspiring to listen to, and all of the great, just what you had to say really reflects the wrestling with a very difficult issue. So thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, member Staunton. Roll call, please. Clerk Allison.
Councilmember Pierce.
Aye.
Councilmember Staunton.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Jackson.
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. The street funding task force final report and recommendations are received by the council, and then this will be the basis upon which we have our discussions at our work session on what direction to go here. So again, member Staunton, thanks for making those comments. And we can't thank you enough. I was just thinking about member Swenson stepping up right away, former member Swenson, and saying, yeah, let's get this done. Let's address this issue. And sure you got to all experience. Matt Shearer has seen it before and seen it for years from the time he was a little kid, the leadership qualities of member Swenson. All the rest of you, your thoughtful comments today were just terrific. It was really, really good for all of us to hear them. And also, I think critically important for our residents to hear your thoughts on this particular difficult issue. So that's it. This is one of those difficult things that we've all seen this. And Member Pierce has been part of this. When the work of the task force is done, all of a sudden you're looking around, there's nothing further to do. And the council says you're done with your work, pat you on the back and say, thanks for all that good work. And you're kind of left there standing wondering, what do we do next? What do we do next? And really, I guess it'd just go home and have do whatever you want to do. But thank you so much for this work. And you may be called upon individually here as we each look through these reports and want to have some questions answered. So thanks again for that great service. Yeah, thank you. And give it, that's the way to do it. Let's give a round of applause for all of that terrific work that was done. So very good. All right, the next item we have on the agenda is public hearings. And we've got two public hearing matters this evening. And Stephanie Hawkinson has the first one, and that is the annual Urban Hennepin County Community Development Block Grant Program funds and the use of those funds. Manager Hawkinson, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to share my screen. So yes, this is something that I do annually. I come before you to get a resolution passed that will go to Hennepin County, explaining how we want our annual allocation of community development block grants spent. As some of you are aware, we're requested to hold a public hearing to pass this resolution. Of our total allocation, 15% stays with the county and is awarded in a collaboration with representatives from all Hennepin County communities, and that's actually happening on Friday. So in the past, for people that have been on the council or watched council meetings, we used to, at the city level, determine how that 15% of the public service money is spent. But what happened was the nonprofits that provide these services would have to go to 10 different communities asking for $5,000 each. And it wasn't a very efficient process. So that happened, all the money then of that 15% is pooled. And then as a group of communities, we decide how those funds will be distributed. And different organizations submit an application, they're reviewed by each city, and then we come together with a scoring system. So tonight, we're actually really looking at the 85%, the $140,000. So our allocation has grown this year. We don't know the exact amount. The HUD budget has not been approved, but so it's based on estimates of past years and different formulas. Ours has increased over last year because in 2020, Edina has seen an increase of 47% in overcrowding. And overcrowding is when there are more than 2 people per bedroom. So it could be a family of 5 or 6 in a 2-bedroom apartment. And so that would be overcrowding, or it could be where families are doubling up in their living conditions because of housing expenses. So over time, since 1992, you can see it's been relatively flat. And this is some based on those variations like overcrowding. We got a bump last year because there was actually an increase percentage in people that were experiencing very low incomes in the city. But it also has to do with federal policy. Since 1992 and then even before, the amount of money that is provided to HUD for affordable housing is decreasing. So tonight I am seeking approval for the allocation of the $140,000 of our allocation, of which I'm proposing that $80,000 is allocated to WALTS, which is West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust Home Within Reach program. And then this $80,000 will be combined with last year's allocation to acquire, rehab, and place a single-family house into a land trust and sell to an eligible home buyer. I'm also seeking $60,000 to be allocated for Hennepin County's home rehab program. There's been an increase in interest by Edina residents to use this program to rehabilitate their homes, with households now on their waiting list. So this is very familiar information to most of you, but to some of the viewers it may not be. The West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust Homes Within Reach program, they provide affordable home ownership opportunities using the community land trust model. And the land trust model is when you separate the value of the land from the value of the house. So the value of the land is held in title by the land trust. And so they sell the value of the house to an eligible home buyer. So the home buyer still has to pay the assessments and the property taxes for the whole parcel, but they're only buying the house and they enter into a ground lease for the land. Since 2007, 14 single-family houses have been acquired. The last time Land Trust House was bought was in 2018, in part because the housing values in Edina and being so high, and our allocation of block grant money is being relatively low. But our funds, our allocation each year helps them leverage money from Hennepin County and Minnesota Housing. If we did not allocate money, they'd say, well, why isn't Edina supporting you? First of all, I think the past has proven that we do support the program, but it also helps them leverage additional funds. I wanted to show this slide because it shows the housing values, median housing values of Edina over time, as well as compared to our neighbors. And this is based on the Minneapolis Area Association of Realtors. In 2020, it was 520,000, which may vary a little from our assessing department. So again, this is realtor data versus assessing data. So it's 520 in Edina. If you look at Bloomington, it's 275 or 315. If you look at Eden Prairie, it's 380. Richfield is 290. St. Louis Park is 326. So our housing values are 100 to 200,000 more. Our median housing values are $100 to $200,000 more than neighboring communities, which makes this which is why we have to combine multiple years of our allocation in order to be able to acquire one home. So the second portion, the $60,000, I'm proposing to have that go to the rehabilitation of private property. The city had paused, we had given money to this program every year since 1992, but then did pause it in 2015, 2018, and then again last year. There were program proceeds those years, so what happens was the loan is forgiven if the borrower stays in the home for 15 years. The loan is forgiven. If they sell the home during those 15 years, it gets rolled back into the pool. So there were some years where there were program proceeds, but those have been dried up. So there's 3,800. When I last saw the report from Hennepin County, there's $3,800 remaining for this program with 5 applicants on the waiting list. So there has been an uptick in demand. Hennepin County does all the work on this. They manage it, they take the applications, they inspect the home, they inspect the work afterwards, they work with the homeowner. They really do administer this. In the past few years, half the recipients were seniors. The income limit cannot exceed, since it's block grant funds, cannot exceed 80% of the area median income. And this translates to, all right, now I made a mistake in my staff report that I didn't realize until after it was published. I said 120% of area median income this program eligibility is up to. It's 80% because it is block grant money, and that is the limit for block grant monies. So this 80% of area median income translates to $82,720 for a household of 4, or $66,240 for a household of 2. And it is a deferred loan that is forgiven after 15 years. So the public hearing, this is a public hearing, and the public comment period ends at noon on March 8th, and then returning on the 16th.
Thank you, Manager Hawkinson. For council members, are there questions regarding the recommendations of Manager Hawkinson with respect to the CDBG grant money? All right, let's open this up for public testimony. Again, if you want to call in, let me find my 800 number here. It is 800-374-0221. Conference ID is 1074418. An operator will ask for your name and address. You press *1 to get into the queue, and then Director Benarott will bring you into the council for any comments. So is there anyone in the queue, Director Benarott, who would like to speak to this issue of the proposed allocation of CDBG funds as recommended by Manager Hawkinson?
Council members, I do have one person listening in on the intercall, but she is not indicating a desire to speak. Because there is a slight delay in the broadcast, there might be others who are trying to get through. So I would recommend we wait a minute or so before moving on. My clock shows that it's 8:47. I'll be back with you at 8:48 or when I have someone ready to testify, whichever is first.
Thank you.
Council members, I have Ms. Janie Weston on the line to speak. Operator, will you please unmute Ms. Weston's line? And then Ms. Weston, please begin by stating your full name and address for the record.
Thank you, Director Benarott. Ms. Weston, welcome.
Hello. This is my first meeting watching online. It's very strange. I missed the actual meetings, but here we are. Anyway, it's Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue, Edina. I'm curious. I follow Nextdoor and the neighborhood website, and some discussion that was on there a couple weeks ago. A few people had received a postcard from the city asking them to consider selling their home to the city at its assessed value to be put into the more affordable housing program that was just described, where the buyer owns the house and not the land that it sits on. Was that postcard going out to people part of what was described tonight, or is it a different part of the more affordable housing thing that the city is trying to do?
All right, yeah, we'll answer that question. Are there any other questions that you want to ask? And then we'll deal with those questions at the conclusion of public input this evening.
Oh, okay. I just had that question. I'm
Okay.
curious if that was tied to this.
We'll get a clarification
That's
on
it.
that from Manager Hawkinson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else, Director Benarott?
I was just checking, sir, and I have no other callers. Again, I would recommend we wait a minute or so before moving on. My clock shows that it just flipped to 8:51, so I will come back to you at 8:52 or when I have my next caller, whichever comes first. It is now 8:52 and I have no other callers, so I think it's safe for you to move forward with your meeting.
Thank you, Director Benarott. Council members, are there any questions for Manager Hawkinson, or does someone care to make a motion to close the public hearing at noon on March 8th, 2021, and to continue the action on Resolution 2021-14 to the March 16, 2021 City Council meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. All right, we get a motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Pierce to close the public hearing on this matter that we just had public testimony on March 8th, 2021 at noon, and continue the action on Resolution 2021-14 with regard to potential use of the CDBG block grant money to the March 16, 2021 City Council meeting. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Clerk Allison.
Councilmember Staunton,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Jackson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pierce,
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. Motion is approved as stated. Manager Hawkinson, I was actually thinking this would be a good topic for mayor and council comments and also city manager comments, but possibly you could deal with this issue now, because I think probably several of us have had inquiries about the postcard that you sent out at the behest of the HRA, and talk about whether this has any linkage to what we're talking about relative to the potential use of the CDBG block grant monies that we've discussed this evening.
Sure, Mayor Hovland, City Council members. It was not the focus of the postcard, but it does get tied up into it. One of the other reasons that Walt has not acquired a home since 2018 is because finding out when there's a home that fits within the price range that works with this program is hard. There are homes in Edina that qualify for these programs, but we often don't find out about them being for sale until after they have been bought. So this was one of the reasons. I have to say that I have received multiple very, very, very positive phone calls from homeowners who are thrilled with this option and have wanted to have their homes be looked at by Homes Within Reach, Walt Homes Within Reach, to see if their home will be a good fit for this program.
Good. Thank you for that clarification. Anything further from council members on this issue before we move on to the next matter? All right, we've got a moment. Go ahead. Member Jackson.
Yeah, briefly. So to Ms. Weston's question, this block grant will be some of the money that's available for the Homes Within Reach program. Is that correct?
Mayor, council member, yes. So the program that the postcard was really focused on was the one that was passed by the HRA last spring, which was an expansion of the homes within reach, because every year we'd give them this tiny bit, relatively speaking, amount of block grant money, and it wasn't enough to make really an impact. So last spring, the HRA approved to expand the financing for this program to be able to expand the program. That was the impetus for the postcard. This, since it's the same program, would also be a beneficiary.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other council member have a follow-on question with regard to this matter? Ms. Weston, thanks for calling in with that question. It's good to get that clarification from Manager Hawkinson, I think, in a public setting. All right, let's move on to the next public hearing matter and our final public hearing matter this evening, and that is a potential conditional use permit with variance for Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church, 500 Blake Road South. And our assistant planner, Chris Hocker, has this matter.
Yes, I do. And I'm going to share my screen. So good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. The request is for a conditional use permit with a 5.41-foot setback variance for parking resurface improvements and entrance canopy for Shepherd of the Hills Church at 500 Blake Road. The property is located in the southwest corner of Maloney Avenue and Blake Road, consisting of a church building, parking areas in the middle to the south and also to the west, and they also own this house that's directly west of the church building. So this is a slide of the existing condition survey as things exist today underneath the snow. To accommodate the application, the following is requested: a conditional use permit for the existing religious institution with parking resurfacing. Anytime there's a change, a conditional use permit has to be processed. And then they're also asking for a 5.41-foot setback variance on the south side of the parking lot. And they would like to have a 3-foot extension along that south edge of the lot to accommodate code compliance, standardized parking stalls, and drive aisles when they do the resurfacing. So this is the plan that they're proposing. Church is proposing to renovate the existing non-conforming parking lot structure. Lot complies with 100 spaces and a requirement by code, and they're over compliance with 118 spaces. However, currently a lot of the areas are non-conforming in terms of setback. The church is proposing an entrance canopy along the south side of the building, as well as which would be right by the doors here. And we're also proposing on new pavement and parking paving striping, new concrete curbing for the parking and drive aisles, a pedestrian-friendly path to the building entrance, new concrete sidewalks, some upgraded lighting, rain guarded in this area in the middle lot, better control of the rainwater in the southeast lot and also in the northwest lot, and a connection between the southeast parking lot. Currently, there's just a sidewalk between these two lots, and then they're going to be eliminating the curb cut and drive aisle access into the parking lot on the west side, and they would be connecting that into an interior drive aisle. So all of this would improve interior circulation. The church is not proposing to add any parking, but they also don't want to reduce any parking spaces. The plan would result in a net increase of 1 parking stall. Maintaining the existing lot and parking spaces reduces the potential for on-street parking in the residential neighborhoods, which they would like to avoid. And it also helps to accommodate the larger events like funerals, weddings, and then this is a polling place, so for voting as well. Existing parking areas are showing cracks in the asphalt, deterioration in sidewalk and curbing, and they also need some stormwater upgrading. The CUP with variance would allow the church to renovate the aging parking lot and bring the parking stalls and drive aisles up to the city code width and depth standards. Currently, all of these areas are non-conforming. They don't meet the code in terms of drive aisles and width and depth standards. The construction will be phased based on funding, with the middle central parking lot part of the first phase, which would be in this area. The plan does include that drop-off canopy on the south side, but the church is not expecting to build that as part of the first phase because they don't currently have funding for it. They would like to, however, put their footings in for that project. So in the event that they do receive funding for it, they don't want to have to tear out new pavement that they've just put down. The plan has a connection between the smaller lot and the southeast end of the property, the main lot. This will make it more central in terms of circulation, so people don't have to go out onto Blake Road like they do currently to get back into a parking area. They can do that just on the inside. Another improvement, again, is elimination of that connection to Maloney. Circulation would then be achieved through the interior drive aisle that's currently existing. The applicant is asking to extend the boundary of this middle lot closer to the south lot line between 2 and 3 feet to the south. The current setback is non-conforming between the existing parking lot and the south lot line currently. The property line and parking area are not parallel, which results in a setback dimension that varies. The current setback varies between 10 feet on the east side here to be about 7.5 feet as you get to the eastern edge. And they'll be proposing a reduction from 7 feet 8 inches on that east side to 4 feet 5 inches on the west side. So the proposed canopy will match the existing buildings in terms of materials, and they would be putting that in later after, not as part of the phase 1 project. The proposal, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on February 24th and determined that the proposal meets the conditional use permit criteria in the city code and Minnesota state statutes and the Edina zoning ordinance in terms of variance approval. The church use on the property currently exists and is not expanding on site. The site and parking resurface would not have an adverse impact on government facilities, utilities, or services. The existing roads would continue to support the site with reduced curb cut access to Maloney Avenue. And the parking lot resurface of existing conditions will not change existing impact on adjacent properties. The 5.41 foot setback variance for parking resurface improvements will relieve practical difficulties given circumstances that are unique and that are not self-created and will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The parking areas currently have non-conforming setbacks in some locations, with those previous setbacks obtained and approved in years past. The proposed setback variance would allow for the parking design to be more code compliant for stall depth and drive aisle width, increase interior circulation with one less driveway connection to the street, and with the southeast and west lots designed to tie in with the existing parking areas more appropriately, improving interior circulation. So the Planning Commission recommended approval and approved the plan unanimously, subject to findings and conditions as listed in the staff report. This evening we have Kurt Bush with Bush Architects, Gary Bush with Bush Architects, speaking for the applicants. And then also present we have Pastor Scott Cyril and Peter Barrett, who is on the church council. So this will be a public hearing, and the public hearing, I believe, will close on March 8th and will be, action will be taken by the council on March 16th. With that, I will stop and try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Zucker. Does anyone on the council have a question for Ms. Zucker, or multiple questions regarding this matter? Ms. Zucker, did you indicate to Mr. Bush or Pastor Searle or Peter Barrett the time they'd have to make a presentation as the applicant? The amount of time?
I did not.
Okay, all right. Well, let's call on them first. This is a public hearing. I'm going to open this up for public testimony, but I'm going to have one of the Bushes from Bush Architects, if they want to make any comments, they could certainly do so. Pastor Searle is with us, and Peter Barrett from the council, and they may wish to make a comment as well. Mr. Bush, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. I'd like to correct the record. My name is actually Gary Demely, and I'm Vice President of Bush Architects. And so we...
Mr. Demely, go ahead.
We have a short presentation that we made to the Planning Commission. We'd like to share that with you. It's just a couple of slides. So if I may share my screen with you.
You certainly can. Does someone need to give Mr. Denley permission to share the screen?
Let's try this. Is that coming up yet?
Not yet, Mr. Denley. Can you spell your last name for us too, please?
Yes, Demele, D-E-M-E-L-E.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Ocker, do you have to do anything to allow Mr. Demely to make his presentation?
It should be.
Or
I have my
Scott Denfeld?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just made Mr. Demely a presenter, so go ahead and try it again and see if it'll allow you to share your screen.
All right.
Are you having any luck?
Not yet.
Getting it to go?
Let's see.
Nothing yet, Mr. Denfeld.
Should be. It's up on my screen anyway.
When you select share, does it what do you see? What is it showing you?
Screen number 1. Let's try this.
It's coming up now, Mr. Demely.
How's that?
That's here.
That's good.
On the screen.
Very good. Anyway, this is Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church. And what we wanted to share with you is just the materials that are used. You can see in the foreground, the parking lot is definitely in need of repaving and also the curbing and cleaning up some of the lighting and whatnot. So it's definitely come to its life's end, and we'd like to do that work. And anyway, there are a number of amenities that we're going to include. And here are a couple of photos of the existing site conditions. And I guess what I wanted to share with you is that the new canopy will be composed of the brick and the metal that you see here. So when that work is completed, it should blend in and go away visually from the street. So it will never look like an addition, hopefully. And as staff member Acker mentioned, we're going to update the bituminous paving, relocate curbs, get our layout to conform with city standards, and have a rain garden. And one other item is we're going to provide some landscape screening. And I'd like to just share with you on a plan where that would be. If we start in the upper left-hand corner here, you can see actually we're going to remove one curb cut. So this will be beneficial to the community on Maloney. And you can see where the screening is being shown here and way down in the southeast corner. completely screening our new parking from our neighbors. But in addition to that, we are going to, have a rain garden, which has already been pointed out. We're also in phase 2 going to provide a little bit better ADA access to get entry into the church. And the last is we're going to upgrade our curb cuts to get conformed with the city. So those are really the items in a nutshell. And that's the end of my presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Demley. And the covered entryway, the canopy, as you characterize it on your plans, that's actually just a covered entryway as opposed to a porte cochere. No one's going to be able to drive underneath the canopy and drop people off. It's just to provide some protection for people as they enter the building? Is that correct?
No, it will be a drive-through, I think.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
I think staff showed a elevation where, yes, it would be a drive-through.
All right, very good.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And does Pastor Searle want to make any comments, or Mr. Barrett from the council?
My name's Peter Barrett. I do not have anything to add other than what was just spoken.
All right, thank you.
And this is Pastor Scott. I don't have anything to add either.
All right, Pastor, thanks as well. All right, this is, I mentioned, is a public hearing matter. I'm going to open this up now for public testimony. So we want to hear from any residents who would like to provide testimony in this matter. Remember, you can call 800-374-0221, and the conference ID is 107-4418. Operator will ask for your name and street address, and then you'll get in the queue by pressing *1, and Director Benarat will bring you in to speak to the council. And then you'll have 3 minutes, and Manager Neal will remind you if you run up against the 3-minute clock, and then you'll need to wrap up your remarks and finish up your testimony. So, Director Benarat, do we have anybody in the queue to speak on this matter?
I do not have anyone in the queue to speak at this time. My clock shows that it's 9:12. Because there is a slight delay in the broadcast, I would recommend we wait until about, actually my clock just flipped to 9:13. So let's wait until 9:14 before moving on. That would give people time to call in and get in the queue if they'd like to speak on this matter. It is now 9:14, and I have no one in the queue to speak and no new callers, so I think it's safe for you to move on with your meeting.
All right, thank you, Director Benarat. For council members, is there a motion to close the public hearing at noon on March 8th, 2021 and continue the action on these items to the March 16, 2021 City Council meeting with respect to Resolution 2021-25, which seeks a conditional use permit with variance for Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church at 500 Lake Road South?
So moved.
Motion by Member Staunton, second.
Second.
Second by Member Jackson. Further discussion? Roll call, please, with respect to the motion as stated.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Jackson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pierce.
Aye.
Councilmember Staunton.
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. The motion is approved, and the public hearing on Resolution 2021-25, which seeks a conditional use permit with variance for Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church in Edina, will be continued until noon on March 8th, 2021, and we will continue this matter for action with respect to that proposed resolution to the March 16, 2021 City Council meeting. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Demley, and thank you, Pastor Scott and Peter Barrett, for being here with us this evening. We appreciate your attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right, very good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Look forward to it. All right, we're now finished with the public hearing. And we're going to move on to reports and recommendations. And the first matter we have this evening, Director Teague has, and that is a sketch plan review. This is the only item in this portion of the agenda tonight, incidentally. A sketch plan review for 4404 Valley View Road, which is the old Burley Hair Salon site. I think many of us know it as. It's been vacated and scraped for a couple of years now.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this site is located in the Valley View Wooddale neighborhood. Property is zoned for commercial and residential uses. I want to note this slide, it is located within the small area plan boundaries for the Valley View Wooddale area. And note that there is a 2-story height maximum, 2 stories and 30 feet tall. This site is part of the Edina Flats project that was approved back in 2018. The site that we're looking here at tonight is the corner here where Oak Lawn and Valley View come together with 62nd. This site was approved for a 2-story, 4-unit condo. The builder hasn't been able to develop that site since the approvals. They have indicated that financially they can't make that work, 4 units on that site. Some of the council members may recall that about a year after the approvals, the builder did come forward with a couple of sketch plan reviews for some commercial uses on the site, but weren't able to make those work either. So the proposal this evening is for a 13-unit, 3-story, all affordable housing project. Of note is there would be surface parking to the west of the building, so no enclosed parking. Here's a quick look at what the building would look like. This request would require, as part of a formal application, an amendment to the comprehensive plan in regard to those height limits. 2 stories and 30 feet, and the proposed building here is 3 stories and 35 feet tall. It would be a conditional use permit with a number of variances. With us this evening is Michael Margulies and Dean DeVolis. So Michael is going to kick off the presentation, and then Dean DeVolis will provide a little more detail. I've indicated to the applicant that they have about 10 minutes to make the presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Margulies.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Margulies, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. We will use no more than the 10 minutes that are allotted to us. By way of introduction, I think this is really appropriate following Manager Stephanie Hawkinson's presentation on housing needs in the city. This will be one of the first for sale, all affordable housing developments that have been presented in probably close to 50 years. And it takes a lot of machinations to make it work, but we think we've come up with both a project and a product that justifies some of the accommodations that we are asking for from the city. So with that, I'm going to ask Dean to walk you through the project. And also with us tonight, by the way, is Dave Remick on behalf of the owner, and he's available to answer questions as well. Dean?
Thank you, Michael. Mayor, Council, good evening. When Michael says 50 years, what he's referring back to is the last ownership of affordable housing project in Edina, which was a condominium building at Centennial Lakes, in which the city offered a $10,000 down payment assistance. The condominiums are $90,000 each. And that was the last meaningful
ownership project developed in Edina. Since then, there's been a few, as Stephanie's report called it, a few scattered site single family projects. Obviously, there's been a creation of affordable rental, but not ownership. And that's where we really see an opportunity to really wind Edina's housing opportunities through this project. But to achieve this affordability, we've had to make design considerations, make it feasible. One is surface parking versus structured parking. That accounts for $30,000 of stall savings. Surface lot costs $2,000, structured parking costs $30,000 a stall on that. The building's not elevated. It's a walk-up 3-story, but that saves a considerable amount of money. It's a simple plan, as you can see, rectangular in size, so it has a very high efficiency. And we're going to use novel construction methodologies. Either we're going to panelize the building, which means think of a deck of cards and stood up, or make it modular. Hence, that's why the plan is pulled together. But in doing this project, we don't want to give up the aesthetics. So we followed the Wooddale Valley View guidelines, and if in your packet, there's page 49 of that plan that refers to row houses. We basically use that as our aesthetic in terms of all the main floor units will have individual entries to the streets. So on all 3 sides, so that the building will look much like a row house, have an aesthetic that fits in and ties in with the neighborhood. And what's not shown on our site plan is that we're going to do extensive landscaping, both to shield the parking lot and both to shield from the neighbor to the north, and incorporate that point that where the street comes in, so it all looks like the front yard of the building. This location really works well for affordable ownership housing or workforce housing, because 1, the services are in the neighborhood. 2, there's a major bus line that runs down Valley View, so there's public transportation. 3, it's by a major employment center, which is obviously Southdale. So a lot of attributes that make this project successful. And really it's geared for the people that provide the backbone of the community. Your secretaries, your legal aides, your nurse practitioners, and so forth. And that's really what the basis of this development is going to be. So now we have a chance in Edina not only provide affordable rental housing, but now a chance to provide affordable ownership housing in a boutique building that is close to what the master plan showed and using that guideline. So we're excited about the project, and I'll stop here and leave it open for questions. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dulles. Did Mr. Remick have anything he wanted to say? All right.
No, I do not, but happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Remick. All right, questions or comments from council members? Somebody care to lead off?
So I have a question, and I guess this would go to Director Teague. Tell us a little bit about the discussions of the small area plan. That was one that I haven't heard much about, but tell us what the trade-offs were, what the thinking was for this area in general, and then sort of this lot, because this does call for a comprehensive plan amendment, and I want to know more about the history before I think about that.
Yeah, the idea behind the height in the 2 stories was to have a similar height to adjacent single-family homes. So that's where the 2-story requirement came in. So you'll see that along the edges. The graphic that Mr. DeVolis is referring to within the packet on that page 49, it's the last page of your attachment. It actually shows about a 2.5-story residential building. But again, the height limit when the plan was originally adopted was 2 stories and 24 feet, but later we amended it to 2 stories and 30 feet to be more consistent with what the height would be for a single family home. Single family home in this area can get up to 30 feet tall.
And And we're sitting at 35 feet, 3 stories.
Director Teague, what is the height of the New Horizons building?
That does have some elements that are a little bit taller. I can look that up here quick and get back to you with an exact measurement.
All right. So is the if you had a 2-story house on Kellogg, are you saying that the height to the ridge line could be 30 feet or 35 feet?
Could be 30 feet.
All right. Other inquiries or comments from, yes, Member Staunton.
Just another question for Mr. Teague. If you could just give us some history. My recollection is that there have been several proposals to do 3 stories on this site over the years, and we've rejected them repeatedly. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. The builder came in I think it was 2018, and they actually did 2 sketch plans rather back to back. The first was a proposal to do a 3-story building. It was about a 13,000 square foot commercial building, and that project, well, it was, the massing on this site was quite large. It was also extremely short parked. They then later came back with a 2-story proposal. It was still 38 feet tall. It had a mezzanine within it. The square footage was a little bit less than that 13,000 square feet, but their parking was still short. So yeah, there were some concerns about height and parking with both of those proposals, and they didn't move forward to a formal application.
And the existing site now is permitted for a 2-story, 4-unit
correct
building? That was part of the approvals for not the adjacent site, but a half a block down. It was all packaged together.
It was all part of the Edina Flats project, correct.
Did the Planning Commission talk at all about why they might deviate from the small area plan?
The sense I got from the Planning Commission was in support more of the affordable housing and the ability to make that work. So they didn't weigh in specifically about how they felt about changing the comprehensive plan. It was more general support for the ability to do affordable housing in this manner.
All right, thank you.
I have some questions.
Yeah, Member Anderson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a good evening. The development team I know has worked hard on this project. I thank you for it. And there's some things about it I really like. You've got this kind of townhouse appearance that can fit into a residential neighborhood, I think, very nicely, and I think it's a good look. I know I listened to your discussion of screening from the neighborhood in terms of the parking. And I ultimately, I know that would be very necessary. I'm sure that you're thinking about that. And your concept is great. The ability to create affordable ownership options is spectacular. And as a matter of fact, I can recall the mayor discussing the Centennial Lakes project from some time ago, and he mentioned it in that conversation that while it wasn't designated as affordable housing at that time, because as you mentioned, it was quite a while ago, it served that purpose, and so that the city was actually a front runner in that area. But that front running has lagged, and so here you are 50 years later with a good option. I have some questions, if you don't mind. I see that your mix of units is primarily 1 and 2 bedrooms.
Correct.
In fact, it's completely one. I didn't quite count them all up. Is it pretty evenly matched at 1s and 2s?
Exactly. It's
okay.
Correct.
All right. So, when we talk about workforce housing or affordable housing in that area, then it more or less ties in. It's not designed for family life necessarily. It's possible, but not necessarily. Do you know what are you anticipating for a price point?
Well, we know for sure we're going to be within and Michael could give the exact number, within the Edina ownership affordable guidelines. And for sure. And we know also that we're looking at, we'll be working with Stephanie to sort of like the housing trust where there's a covenant to keep the units affordable over time. We're going to establish that also. So that
20 years, I think.
Yeah, 20 years. So that'll be part of the package also. So we maintain that affordability going into the future. So those two components will be part of this project. And obviously we're going to strive to get those numbers as economically feasible in new construction.
Okay. Well, the Metropolitan Council guidance on that, are you shooting for a 60% AMI there or an 80?
Michael, I think we're shooting for 60 using the Edina guidelines. I think
60.
it's built around that, right?
Okay.
And Michael, is the Edina guidelines in that basis also, correct? No, Michael's not there. Yes, but we're shooting for that
He's
basis
nodding.
because okay, he's nodding because
Yeah.
that really gets 60% really gets at the workforce housing.
Yeah,
I
it
mean, 80
does.
helps, but 60 starts answering that question of that group of employees that I sort of started to describe.
I apologize for not having my mic on. So yes, it would be 60%, but there are also some characteristics that help push that along in terms of how long the covenant goes. Could it be more than 20 years? The answer is yes. And how the property gets remarketed over in the transition from owner to owner. And there have been some pretty creative ideas that have come up in other communities, and Stephanie has as well. And we're going to take advantage of those and try and build on those so that it's more than just here are some affordable units. We want to keep them affordable in the right way for the long term.
Okay. Well, thank you.
And then another thought we had, whether the Edina Foundation accepts this or not, we have not spoken with them. The Centennial Lakes had a very good program with a down payment assistance. We hope that could be also incorporated with this project too. So not only do we have it affordable, but if there's an opportunity put a down payment assistance for like Edina residents, that could be another overlay that would help really drive the affordability of this.
Sure. It kind of brings me to the next question. So we're on the same wavelength here. What do you anticipate is the source of your takeouts?
Michael?
Well, council member, what do you mean by takeouts?
You mean equity or what do you?
No. You're going to have to finance each one of these units.
Oh, yes.
And so again, I kind of look to it as potentially an FHA project or an MHFHA product. HUD has some financing options. Right. I don't know if there's a special program that I'm not aware of that you're trying to fit into.
There are a number of programs, Councilmember Anderson. Some of our local lenders have packages that they will put on HUD programs. There are 3 or 4 possibilities right now that will within this price range and the income range probably work out. I don't think we're going to have much difficulty finding appropriate financing for this. I think one of the harder problems is solving the down payment issue, but I think there are ways to attack that as well.
Okay. I think that's good thinking. There's Metropolitan Council guidance on this. As you probably know, you've probably reviewed it. I just want to touch base with you on it. They make some working assumptions for a purchase under those affordable guidelines. So you're working with, on a 60% AMI, you're working with about a 228 maximum or 228.5 maximum. You really could probably range up to an 80% AMI. It doesn't necessarily fall within the our existing affordable housing policy, but it would give you some upside there. I heard Director Hawkinson mention earlier that 80% AMI at the income level of 78.5 would be adjusted down with, say, a couple or two people at to 66,240. And I think if that's accurate, I don't know the relationship here between those reductions at either a 60 or 80% AMI. I'm only drilling down on this a little bit just to try to get to who your market's going to be. I know you talked about it quite a bit at the Planning Commission presentation. So I just want to touch base with you on that. It's feeling as if that reduction's in place, you're going to be, I don't know, 55,000 at a 60% AMI with two people, and that's probably about what you're looking at here, which probably brings that price point down some. But the Metropolitan Council assumption used 3 5/8. The current rates are below that, and I'm gonna.
Yep, correct.
3 and what? 3 1/4. 3
Yeah.
3 1/4. Yeah, today. So if you were moving quickly, you'd probably be able to hit that note. I'm kind of curious. I asked Director Teague earlier in the day today about the status on the original approved the 4 unit that was in there, and what I've heard, and this is a question maybe for the development team. What I've heard is that they were kind of struggling financially in order to fit that 4 unit in there. Is that your impression, or do you have better information?
It's just the cost. You think about that underground garage and a triangle shaped building and the nature of the ramp going in there. It's an incredibly inefficient building. So because of that, it has to be sold at a very expensive price to make up for the inefficiencies. So just the nature of the unusual shape of the site and the small underground garage and the ramp and the services of an elevator building, all those packages, all those elements just drove that cost to be very aggressive. So yeah, that's just a factor of the site and the scale of trying to do a development like that. It forces into a luxury category.
Okay. And I think that's probably the issue there. And I don't know whether they could have gotten, or whether you've considered getting more units than 4 on the site. You're clearly proposing 13 in your sketch plan. Well, so to get to the question earlier from member Jackson was about the history of the small area plan in there, and I've looked at that as closely as I could today and yesterday, and came to some conclusions. Director Teague mentioned earlier that the original small area plan was for 2 stories and 24 feet. And that was amended for ceiling height, basically new ceiling heights to 30 feet. My concerns are that the small area plan was very firm about 2 stories all the way through. And in fact, moving away from the center of the node, the intention was to really scale down so that the high point in the small area plan is at the center of the node, or potentially at the center of the node. So when we move away from that and start moving up to go to 3 stories, one of the concerns stated in the small area plan was it could tend to dominate the very approximate residential area. So there's that to consider. The gateway aspect that was discussed at the Planning Commission presentation, in which I know that you're aware of, is a little bit of concern for me anyway, because the idea of the gateway concept it isn't really addressed in the sketch plan, and I think you're struggling with the nature of the site. I understand it; it's rectilinear in composition, and so the orientation in order to get the number of units that you're seeking onto that site kind of moves away from the concept of creating a gateway of some kind. So rather than to introduce the building to Valley View, where then and beginning to move down from the high point of the node, we're kind of gearing up there. And we have, as you know, the I wouldn't call it encroachment, but approach to the public realm. And is it the southwest corner, I think, here? I think so.
Yeah.
So that I think you're like 1 foot 9 inch from the public realm there. So that the variances, because I'm sure that some variances might be in play here when you come forward in the future, but that 1 foot 9 inches to me is dangerous, as well as detracting from the general walkability of the area. So what's happening is, in order to get the number of units, we're going up a story from what the small area plan is outlining. And then, of course, there's the mass of the building on the site. I don't get very worried really about your surface parking. I think that you're doing everything that you can to create affordability on the site. And if it's screened well, and I think you can do that, I think if it's screened well, everybody can live with it. I've had a couple of comments from the neighborhood already today about concerns about parking on residential streets surrounding it. That was brought forward, but you'll try to figure that out. I know as you go. The mass of the building on the site is a big concern for me anyway, and I just think that the derivation from the small area plan is it's sparking some question marks at this time. The 1 foot 9 inches is a big deal, I think. If a kid is on a bike coming through there at 1 foot 9 inches, I get really worried about that. Last thing on modular construction, it works. And I think you're wise to try to introduce that as affordability there. I've used it in the past on 8 units further west, and it was very, very workable. You gave some assurance in your planning commission presentation. I didn't hear you speak much about it tonight, so I will for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Because it's completely controlled construction. It meets code, and you're doing it in a controlled environment and then shipping it on site. And you're not going very far for the shipping, which can drive the cost of modular construction up. It's just the movement of it. But if you can figure out how to get that on that site, there's no reason not to use it. People have kind of a bad idea about it. I don't know why. They haven't really looked at it very closely. I want to see if I have anything else here in my notes. I don't think so. But anyway, thank you for your time and development of the concept.
No, thank you. I think we can answer the 1 foot 9, as I push or pull it and work it. The height, we're 5 feet above the 30 feet. So we're close. And the project that I'm doing further down and the Edina flats are both much taller structures. So we still have some of that pyramidal effect. The 3 stories, must argue, we sort of need to scale to create the affordability. And a 3-story building is the most efficient type you could build. So some things I could adjust, others start to erode the affordability within it. And one is the height. And hopefully, 5 feet over isn't a fatal flaw in this equation. And I try to keep it tight at 35. So I'm close to 30, but yes, it's not 30.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Member Stoughton?
Thank you. I'd echo a lot of the comments that Member Anderson made. I think I applaud the effort to try to figure out affordable housing in an ownership model. But I think we need to wrestle with the small area plan and how this fits in. And frankly, there was none of that discussion really at the Planning Commission this time around. So if it comes back, I think we really need them to think through the trade-offs there. And maybe those were implicit in their conversation, but I didn't hear any express wrestling with that issue, because this has been a very important plan. I was around when it was done, and it's very important to the neighborhood, and they rely on it. And so we have, on a number of occasions, been asked to deviate from it, especially on this particular site, and have declined to do so. So I think it's fair to say we'll need a good reason to depart from it. And I'll need to hear the analysis of why we would do that. And then a lot of the bulk kind of issues, and I think Member Anderson did a terrific job of walking through some of the other issues that you'll have to wrestle with. But I'll be looking forward to hearing how the Planning Commission wrestles with that, and of course, in a public hearing context, what our folks in the neighborhood feel about that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Staunton. Member Pierce?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I echo lots of the other comments that you've already heard. The only thing I wanted to focus on actually was the small area plan. And so I will be interested to understand how this proposed structure kind of fits in with the small area plan. It's easy on the surface to say, well, 30 feet versus 35, and it's close. I admit I have not gone out to the location yet like I usually would, so that I could see the lines. And then for this particular project, it would be, I think, facing north on Valley View. So the residential is behind the unit. And so that's the area that I think I'd be most interested in. I kind of think the location of it with Oak Lawn there and Valley View, and then some of the screening that you plan to do for the parking, I think that does kind of help it naturally kind of fit in with the look and feel of the area. But it will be, for me, what is the impact of that additional 5 feet for the area behind the unit? And so that's actually the only additional thing that I had. We definitely applaud you for trying to bring an affordable ownership model for housing. We definitely need that. So I'll definitely applaud the development effort there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Pierce. Member Jackson?
Thank you. I think, my concerns have all been addressed. I do want to echo the sentiment that this is exciting to think of having an ownership opportunity at an affordable level. I don't know the appropriateness at a sketch plan to talk about the financing. I know the reason we don't have many condominiums in Edina is that the financing of any kind of condominium is difficult. And I hope that going forward, you do have a pretty solid footing, because this is exciting. And I'd hate to get all excited about having this come through and then not have the financing. But that's your business, and you'll get it put together. But I think it's a neat opportunity. I do want to. I'm really uncomfortable, as Member Anderson said, with that 1 foot 9 inches by the sidewalk. And I just don't know quite what to do about that, because it's a game of Tetris for you guys trying to fit this all together. And I do want to have a discussion, as Member Pierce and Member Staunton said, about the small area plan, because that's put together to be predictable for the neighborhood. And we do want to try and honor that to the best of our ability. And if it's balancing, let's hear what the balances are. But thank you so much. This is exciting. It's an interesting concept, and I'm looking forward to learning more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. First of all, can you give us a status report on the new apartment building we approved across the street?
Oh, you're referring to the Valley View project?
Correct.
We are in the midst of working drawings right now in preparation for spring construction. So that is moving ahead.
Good. That's going to go forward.
Yes.
All right, good to know. And this, I know I've talked to Mr. Remick a couple times over the past few years about the challenges of this site, and I think they are daunting. But I got to still say I'm conflicted by this project. I applaud you on the one hand for recognizing the importance of architectural integrity at any price point for housing. I think it's really critical that people that are buying affordable units get to live in something that's got a wonderful appearance to it, just like somebody who's living in a luxury building. And it certainly is possible to have affordable buildings look good, and we know that we know that you as an architect have got that in you. And I thought Member Anderson made a good point about modular. I think there's probably some really good design being done with modular and something that would work well here. I am bothered by the setback issues as well as my colleagues. Not only the 1.5 feet from Valley View Road, but you've got a house to the north. You transition from here into that single-family neighborhood, and I see that you've got about 9 feet. I think it's 9 feet between you and the property line to the north to the existing house, and the setback is supposed to be 35 feet.
Actually, I think it's more than 9. You're referring to the parking lot. It's 14 feet, 14.4 from the house to the north, from property line
Hey,
to our building.
yeah, all right. I should have blown up my screen. My glasses weren't helping me as much as they should have. 14.6.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got that blown up now. Yeah. So I guess I'd be, what would be interesting to know would be, and I can't recall this, both the height of the New Horizons, New Horizons, and also the setback, the north setback line on the New Horizons. It seems to me like we let them be closer than they would otherwise have been under the city standards that are in place there. And so I'd like to know that information.
Okay.
Because as I said, I do see the challenges of this site.
Mr. Mayor, I did look that information up on the New Horizons.
Yep.
And it's a 2-story building. Believe it or not, it's actually a remodel. They put that playground equipment up on the roof, and in order to get up there, they needed to construct an elevator.
Yep.
And there's a stairway, elevator, and lobby up there. That is 41 feet tall. They received a variance in order to do that.
All right, and do you happen to know that north property line setback, if we let them do something less than what was the standard?
I believe it's 5 feet, and I will double check that here right now.
When I drive by there, I think that the New Horizons is very close to the lot line, because it seems like they're very, very close to the house to the north. I think there's a elevation change here too, isn't there, Mr. DeVos, to the north? So
Yeah, it goes up a little bit, which is good because the building will scale better on the north side.
That's correct. I agree with you on that. And so,
yep. So it is 5 feet. That was an existing condition.
And you're talking about 14.6 here. Yeah, it was an existing condition because of the building being there before.
That's correct.
Yeah, and they just went up on the existing building line.
Right.
It seems to me that at first I was bothered by the fact that we had surface parking only, but I also understand the difficulties and the costs involved in trying to do something underground, especially if you're trying to achieve some level of affordability. But it does seem to me that in addition to landscaping, there could be something else done with the parking stalls or some kind of pergola effect of some kind or another. Mr. DeVola said, I think that you with your architectural creativity could come up with something that would break up that sense of
scale it.
Yeah,
yep.
The asphalt sheet,
Yep.
So keep that in mind. And I think I thought that to everybody else's point too. I thought Member Anderson did a great job of talking through everything. And again, I tell you, I'm conflicted. I just don't know. I don't know what would work there and make it feasible. And you've certainly come up with one idea on affordable for ownership housing, and that's got its own level of appeal. So when we think about how it fits into the neighborhood, that's something to be mindful of too. The way it sits to Valley View too, it's when you drive by there with a building that close to Valley View, I don't like the idea that you might have the sensation that it's hanging over Valley View. And that's the sense I have right now, and I think that's whatever other council members are trying to tell you too, is that it feels like it's kind of hanging over Valley View. And I don't know if you could go podium there a little bit to help with the height and adjust that setback some way, somehow.
The one way it may have to, unfortunately, may have to shrink it a bit, but that's probably the only way, because if I get too complicated with the shape, podium, I start driving up costs. So the solution may be to shrink the footprint slightly, but I don't want to take too much out of the units, because I want some dignity in the scale of the units, because they're about 1,400 and 1,900 square feet respectively, which is a good size for people to have.
Did you look at trying to tip it so that it wasn't parallel to Oaklawn, but it was parallel to Valley View?
Yes, the parking doesn't fit. Trust me, I played with this thing multiple ways, and paper dolls and switch it around to get the 1-for-1 parking ratio. This is what it has to be, but that doesn't mean, the idea was going to put, have the doors on both sides. I was going to add one on the Valley View side, so it really looks like a wraparound townhouse, to really keep that kind of aesthetics of the building as much as I could follow the original Wooddale Valley View plan, so that the three sides that face the lot, Oakland and Valley View, appears as fronts and has entries and keeps that kind of character.
Yeah, I think it's critical that you make Valley View, there's a Valley View side, have some real architectural appeal to it.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Those are all my comments.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We'll work on it. But I'm assuming, and I'm just going to ask the question, that I should come back with this and try to modify it as much as I can within reason. Is that a fair statement?
I don't think we can presuppose anything. We're not prejudging it. We're leaving that decision to you.
Okay.
You've heard the comments. You've heard the Planning Commission comments.
Yep.
You'll have to decide if this makes sense.
Okay. I'll leave it at that. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Margulies. Thank you, Mr. Remick.
Thank you.
But you sure might look up and down the street to see how it fits in relative to other things. So, all right. Thanks, folks. All right, we're going to move on to commission correspondence. All right. Do we have any other correspondence that we need to be mindful of for the council that's come in while we've been? All right.
We do not.
All right. I didn't get an aviation noise update from Member Brindle. Did you?
I did not either.
Manager Neal? All right. I was going to ask her this morning and then I forgot during Rotary. Mayor and council comments. Member Pierce, want to lead us off?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a quick one, and it just goes back to the work that Hannah and team did during Black History Month. The approach that they used, and I corresponded with her in email a few times. The approach that they used, I thought, really helped the neighborhood celebrate, and it turned out to be really neat. And I'm really excited about the next holiday, the next observance that we do, because I think it's going to really It's going to really bode well for the neighborhood. And so I think that for the community. So I think they did an awesome job, and I'm just looking forward to the next observance.
Thank you, Member Pierce. And Member Anderson.
Thank you. I've got a couple of housekeeping things that have come up here just in very recent times, and I wanted to bring them forward just as a matter of touching base on them. If there's any feedback, I think that the people involved would be appreciative of that. I think we all had an email on a fence issue here in the last day or two, I think. I don't have that name directly at hand. I could find it. And in that particular instance, the resident had acquired a property and found that there was a fence that was 3 feet into their property, and they were wondering if we have any guidelines on that. It's an encumbrance clearly, and she had a survey done, and that revealed the encumbrance, and wasn't getting cooperation, and reached out. So I inquired about it a little bit because I frankly think it may be a title insurance issue for her, and suggested that she talk to her title insurer. But I did also. Liz Olson was quick to get back on that. I want to congratulate her, commend her on that, on fence regulations that we have. We don't permit them. We don't really take a look at them. We have some guidelines. I don't know how you'd ever try to permit putting in a fence. It would be difficult to do, and but I do think because Liz Olson's response to the resident was that this is coming up often these days. So you say, well, is there anything that we can think about here? So I'm throwing that out, just because if it's coming up often, it does more or less fall within our purview. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. But any feedback that you may have, even this evening or in the near future, could be useful. And along similar lines, there was an inquiry from a resident in the Gleason Valley View Road area, inquiring about lighted sign standards and what we do with those. There was an expressed concern about illumination in that particular area, and did that affect the residential areas directly around it. That's pretty close to where I live, and I've taken a drive through there. What happens there is that the high school, middle school signage is out there, and that's illuminated. St. Patrick's now has an illuminated sign. St. Albans on that same corner. So it is true that there's a lot of illumination right within that. Our signage regulations and don't really talk about that. It's a permitted use. It goes in, but there's no limitation or regulation around how bright it can get, how many lumens are generated from the sign. There are hours of operation that's very clear in the statute or ordinance, but I thought it was a reasonable question to ask. And the further question was, could it get bigger? Could there be more signage? Could there be more direction? Could there be another church or even small commercial operation that might come to pass in there that would create that much more illumination? So I think it's a reasonable question to ask. We don't really have any ordinances that limit that. We issue the permit. It doesn't have to be reviewed. Once it's issued, it exists in perpetuity. So we don't have any way to call back on that or say, gee whiz, what should we be doing here? But I'm throwing that out as well for consideration of her comment, because it's coming from the field, and I think something to think about. And that's what I have tonight.
All right, thanks, Member Anderson. Member Staunton?
Nothing for me tonight, thank you. Looking forward to our visit on Thursday.
Member Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two things. One, I want to just talk briefly about this Homes Within Reach program. When I was campaigning last year, I cannot tell you the number of times that people said to me, I like my home, I like my neighborhood, and I'm afraid that homes like mine are disappearing in Edina. And trying to keep smaller homes is a really, really difficult task. And I want to applaud Stephanie Hawkinson and Manager Neal for looking for creative ways to do that, because I certainly heard that a number of times. And it's a very strongly held belief that we want to have different sized homes available in the city. And so it's a home preservation program, and I'm excited about it. And I hope that it's successful. And I wanted to just say that I heard that a lot from various people. And so I'm pleased that we're acting on that. The other thing was sort of a confluence of ideas. I got an email from a person who had moved to close to the 70th and Cahill area and was excited about the small area plan there and what kind of new businesses would be coming in. And I looked at the small area plan for the Wooddale and Valley View, and a lot of it envisions small businesses there. And then at our State of the City event on Thursday, we talked about the state of business in Edina. And I just want to do a shout out that how much we really do appreciate our small businesses and all of our businesses in Edina, but it really is a part of our character here, and COVID's been hard on it. And as we look at new development, I hope that we can keep the idea of keeping some neighborhood retail in our minds, because it does make it a nice place to live. And there was just too many coincidences to have that popping up in different areas. So I wanted to do a shout out to our businesses. So thank you.
Thank you, Jackson. All right. Well, an interesting piece of information come our way from Elizabeth Couch, Mayor of Burnsville, who sits at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. There was some preliminary data released on the American Recovery Act that's in Congress right now, and some preliminary numbers that were published. And I sent them on to Manager Neal, including the Excel spreadsheet that covers basically every city and township in the United States. And so Edina, City of Edina is in there. No guarantee, estimated numbers that are probably more than double what we received during the CARES Act. And that's all I think I'll need to say about it at this point in time. But it was interesting to see two sets of numbers. One was called no overlap and one was called all overlap. And we're trying to get a definition out of Congressman Phillips's office as to what that exactly means. Now, there's a definition in the Excel spreadsheet, but I still couldn't quite follow it, how it applied to us, which of those numbers could potentially apply, or if either of them would apply, depending on what happens with the Recovery Act. So we'll just wait and see on that. But it was encouraging to see that the act did have something in there for cities, and that the funds could be applied, I think, for revenue losses, which we've had a significant amount of in our community. Yep, we had State of the City. Tremendous job done by Jennifer Benerot and her staff in pulling together information as to what's happened in a really significant year in the history of our city, not only for us in governance, but just our entire population and how everybody's been impacted. And so being able to talk about what we've done for small business and what we've done for rental assistance and other things that have occurred in our community over the past year was nice to be able to kind of do and condense it into one presentation. And thanks for those who attended. We did a hybrid, which was partially attended in person at the country club between the Rotary and the Chamber, and then we did it virtually as well. So that actually worked out pretty well. I think everybody felt pretty safe. And I think that's it for me. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have just a couple of things tonight. One is to follow up on the federal spending question that you raised. One of the things that I would like to do in this round of spending is try to add a little bit more community focus to how we spend this money and to be a little more creative with how we spend this money. And so to those ends, I would like to propose back to the council a process for making a decision that ends ultimately with the council, but one in which we engage the community and get some ideas about how we could best spend a substantial amount of money in the community to get the community moving from an economic standpoint. So I'm working on that with my team here, and we'd like to bring some ideas back to you here in a few weeks. I think what you should pay attention to when you're thinking about this issue is the big number. So the 1.9 trillion is the number in the bill that has, as the mayor mentioned, about double the amount of money in federal spending that we received in the first round of CARES funding. So if that number drifts down, it's probably impacting the local government allocations. If that number stays where it is, it includes a substantial amount of money for cities, local governments all over the country. Next item is that we are going forward with the ballistic improvements in the council chambers. So you know that project is going on with the new central reception desk in City Hall. We did get a price for that, and we are going to move forward with making improvements in and around the council dais that we've talked about for many years and now have a vendor who will do that. I talked to Mr. Milner earlier this morning, and we do have the rapid flashing beacons installed now at 58th and France as we wait for the county to complete its review and approval of the traffic signal design that will ultimately replace those beacons that are there currently. The contractor, we've engaged the same contractor to make this change, and they are available and willing to do the work. We really are just waiting for the county to complete its review, so we hope to get through that quickly. And finally, the Highlands Park Cell Tower project, one that we've talked about for a few years and ultimately gave an approval to, I believe, last year. We expect that project to start sometime later this week, and they have received all the necessary approvals and regulatory approvals that they need. So you will be seeing some activity in the park later this week, and that's all that I've had.
All right. Did that cause anyone to think about it? Anything else they wanted to visit about with their colleagues? I just thought of one thing. I was on a call today with the Minnesota mayors together, and we had both Steve Grove, the commissioner of deed, and Angie Dickinson, who runs technology for the state, on the call. And there are some grants at deed. I'm directing this to Manager Neal. There's some grants available at deed to better map cities or areas of cities where we have deficiencies in coverage, broadband coverage. So might take a look at that. They'll help us with some mapping, and they may have some grants to help us with if we have some areas that are underserved. They may help with that too. And I think we know that the school district, I think, was buying some hotspots for some of the kids. So some of our neighborhoods are not as strong as some other neighborhoods with respect to the capabilities from an internet standpoint. So let's look at that. Then I was thinking about the school district too. And I was thinking that it would be good if we could have even a virtual meeting with the school board to kind of get brought up to date on what they're thinking about in terms of kids. You know, I think we know generally, but the processes they've gone through and some of the issues they're facing. Learn a little bit about that referendum, the technology referendum that's set for May. And there was another issue that Member Jackson raised this morning, I think, at the Rotary meeting too, that was school related. I'm trying to recall.
It was the survey for the superintendent.
Oh yeah, so that people in our community should know that as well. You want to speak to that, Member Jackson?
The school board has put up on the Edina Schools website a very brief survey. I took it this morning. It's 4 questions or so, asking for community input on questions to ask regarding the new superintendent. They're doing a search and they want to have a sense of what the community is looking for. So I do encourage everybody to go. It's edinaschools.org, I believe, is their website, and it's easy to find, easy to take, and I hope that everybody weighs in because the schools are such an important part of our community.
Good, thank you. That's all I had. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Everybody wants to stay. I second.
All right. Member Jackson moves, Member Anderson seconds the adjournment of the city council meeting on March 2nd, 2021. Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Clerk Allison?
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Jackson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pierce, Councilmember
Member
Pierce.
Pierce?
Oh, you're muted.
Aye.
Councilmember Staunton,
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
It's only 10:15. No one knew what to do at the time.